This story began when an evil god descended upon the earth and its inhabitants in order to destroy everything. With his arrival, a real apocalypse began in the world, which was not at all like how it was described in books and films. A mysterious evil force was forcing people to turn into mindless zombies with a desire that was only to bring death. Your friends and good neighbors of yesterday could today instantly want to eat you alive, without even remembering who you were to them. The world without involvement was on the verge of complete destruction, and it seemed that there was no way to fix everything and change it. It was at this moment that the protagonist of this story received a mysterious relic. This small stone was the 6 great underworlds. After this, the guy's life changed because he unexpectedly became a warden, which gave him unprecedented strength. However, everything was not as good as it seemed at first glance. The main character felt that something was wrong with this relic. While exploring the 6 great hells, the guy managed to meet a black demon bear on his way, who was called Underguanyin. He also had to meet the 9-tailed fox demon Sudaji, who had once overthrown the Shang dynasty. Lei was here, Genzi, along with countless other sinful gods and great demons. But the most important thing is that the very same entity was here. Now the main character had to find out why they were all imprisoned in the great underworld. If you're interested, you can follow your overseer into the thick of things. However, keep in mind that on this path you will have to defeat the gods, because this is the only way to return back. A huge blood moon hung over the ruined city. Multi-story buildings were ablaze. It was hard to believe that only a few days had passed since the beginning of the apocalypse. The main character of this story was not at all surprised or even frightened by all this, because now he had more serious problems. They were trying to kill him. Meanwhile, in the distance, a huge monster was visible, mercilessly destroying the remains of civilization. He was clearly lacking in intelligence, but he knew his business well. It seemed that this monster had only one goal: to destroy as much as possible and leave no trace of the huge metropolis. At the same time, the monster let out a furious roar, as if warning its victims of its approach. In this city, the danger was not only the sinister giant. For some inexplicable reason, a few days ago, people began to turn into real zombies who only wanted to satisfy their hunger. Now their huge hordes were chasing people all over the city. In such conditions, there was no talk of helping each other. Everyone was on their own. In all this turmoil, no one paid attention to the fact that unknown people were mercilessly beating the main character. It was not clear what could have caused this. Finally, the exhausted and wounded guy was doused with flammable liquid in order to kill him in the most brutal way. The girl in the red dress laughed at the guy and said that they would see each other again in the next life. Her boyfriend was also happy with what was happening and said that he would take everything that the main character had from him. The scoundrel spoke of a mysterious stone on which it was written that these were the 6 great underworlds. The main character would really like to get his thing back, but he clearly didn't have enough strength for this, so he had to just watch what was happening indifferently and endure ridicule. Meanwhile, the villain was already freeing the black demon bear from the relic, laughing at the fact that the main character's sister was dragged away by zombies because she didn't want to give him this stone. After that, the guy, putting a crazy smile on his face, decided to cheer up his enemy by saying that his sister's blood was still useful. The main character was very angry and wanted with all his might to teach the scoundrel a lesson for what he did and said, but unfortunately, he could no longer do anything. At this time, the people who were trying to escape from the zombie horde were very happy to see the demon bear and believed that now the strongest owner of the power would be able to help them. At the same time, the guy and the girl had already jumped into the paw of a huge bear, continuing to make fun of the main character, wishing him to disappear in flames. Finally, the girl threw a lit lighter towards the guy, who was covered in gasoline, and continued to lie on the ground, unable to even move. Then a huge demonic bear, controlled by people, rushed towards the monster in order to fight him in an equal duel. The attention of all the survivors was riveted on the 2 giants, who began to fight to the death on the ruins of the former civilization. Absolutely no one noticed the bright flash of fire that formed right above the main character. The scorching flame engulfed the helpless guy in an instant. While the guy was still conscious, enduring incredible pain, he thought only about the fact that if the next life existed, he would never let it go. At that moment, the guy's right eye suddenly changed its color to bright gold. He felt it and was very surprised. Suddenly, the main character heard an unfamiliar voice, which seemed to come from within and suggested starting all over again, so his heart seemed to start beating with renewed vigor. At the same time, the guy's unusual eye emitted streams of bright energy similar to raging tongues of flame. The next moment, the main character woke up in horror from a terrible dream, but he immediately realized that everything that happened was true, and he still managed to move in time. He was surprised that he was completely whole. There were no wounds or fire. However, the guy was very interested in what kind of voice he had recently heard in his head. After that, the main character quickly glanced at the date on his phone. The calendar showed the 1st of July 2028, which meant that he had gone back in time 3 days before the apocalypse. In order to calm down a little, the main character went to the bathroom to wash up, still not believing that everything had started anew for him. Looking in the mirror, he was surprised to discover that his right eye had turned pale gold. The guy immediately assumed that it was a fire seed that remained after he burned to death. After some time, the main character was already completely collected and went outside to make sure that he really returned in time. He walked along familiar streets and could not believe that in 3 days, all of this would be destroyed, and the people surrounding him now would most likely be dead or turn into brainless zombies. The guy was already anticipating that with the coming of the apocalypse, people would begin to turn into zombies, and although some of them would gain strength, they would not have time to defeat the evil god, and the city would turn into hell. He also thought that his girlfriend, whose name was Ruolan, and his best friend Shijun would soon betray him without hesitation and contribute to his death. As soon as the main character thought about this, he immediately received a call from Ruolan on his phone, which surprised him a little. Despite the resentment for what would happen, he still answered the call. The girl immediately began to ask with displeasure why Xiaoyan did not answer for a long time, assuming that he wanted to break up with her. The guy didn't like the fact that every time the girl didn't like something, she threatened to break up with him. Earlier, Xiaoyan had been worried about pleasing her, but now he just wanted to stop all of this. That is why now the main character with great pleasure offered Ruolan to break up, because he was fed up with everything and he did not want to serve anyone anymore. Without waiting for the girl Xia's answer, Yan ended the call and silently put the phone in his pocket. The main character was very happy that now he would get at least a little peace, but he had to hurry and sort out all the matters while he still had such an opportunity. Ruolan was very unhappy that the main character ended their relationship so suddenly, which is why she threw her phone on the bed in a fit of anger. The girl was also very angry that her now ex-boyfriend dared to just hang up and add her contact to the blacklist so that she could no longer call him. Shijun, who witnessed all of this, calmly asked if his friend had guessed everything. Ruolan found it hard to believe since she considered the main character to be very stupid. Unexpectedly, Shijun said that he had to take the ancient family heirlooms with spiritual energy because something big was about to happen. The girl remembered that Xiaoyan also kept some very old trinket. The guy was very interested in this, so he began to ask where this relic was kept. Ruolan said that it was with the main character's sister, whose name was Xia Yun. The girl then promised that when Xiaoyan calmed down and crawled to her with apologies, then she would beg for this ancient relic and bring it to her lover. Shijun was very pleased with this. At this time, the main character was already holding in his hand a small stone that looked very old, on which some hieroglyphs were visible, but they were difficult to read due to centuries of contamination. Xia Yun, who had just met her brother, was very surprised that he asked to give her this relic so suddenly, and even took a taxi 30 kilometers to her school for this. The girl was also very interested in why Xia's right eye Yana looked a little strange. The guy, without answering this question, directly asked his sister if she trusted him. Xia Yun was very surprised by such an unexpected question, but still answered that, of course, she trusted her older brother. Then, with a smile on her face and great enthusiasm, she reminded the main character that they always helped each other. After that, Xia Yun rushed forward to hug her brother, continuing to talk about how she always trusted him unconditionally, because she knew that everything he did was for her good. Hearing this, Xiaoyan asked the girl to go to school now and pick up her things, and then immediately return home with him. Xiaoyan immediately agreed to everything without asking any unnecessary questions. She turned around and started walking to school, while talking about how they would see each other in 2 hours. The main character was very surprised that his sister didn't even ask why he asked her about it. To this, Xiaoyan said briefly with a smile that she believed her brother. After that, the girl left, and the main character, looking at her, thought only about the fact that this time he would do everything possible to ensure that Xia Yun survived. At the same time, the main character was clutching that very ancient family heirloom in his hand, because it was thanks to it that he was going to make sure that his words were not just empty promises. Unexpectedly, Xia Yan, looking at this stone, noticed that something about it had clearly changed since the last time he saw it. The guy could not understand the reason for this. In these thoughts, he did not notice at all that mysterious energy began to emerge from his golden eye on its own. The next moment, the energy from the eye rushed straight into the relic, which greatly surprised Yana. This energy began to be absorbed into the stone, from which it began to tremble violently right in the guy's hands. In addition, the inscription, which had not been visible before, was now literally burning with bright hieroglyphs. The main character watched in fascination as the ancient relic came to life before his eyes, simultaneously emitting a mysterious aura around itself. The inscription said that these were the 6 great underworlds. Once the relic had absorbed enough energy, its aura began to rapidly increase in volume, as if it was trying to absorb Yana. A moment later, the guy was literally flying through space as if he had entered a portal of movement. On the other side, nothing was visible except darkness. Very soon, Yan found himself in an otherworldly world where in the center of a small rocky island stood a multi-story building in a traditional style. Strong iron chains extended from it in all directions. The main character was amazed not only by the appearance of this structure, but also by everything that was happening around. It seemed that he had already begun to guess what purposes this tower served. Gradually, an unprecedented force descended on Yana was getting lower and lower, thanks to which he could see that on each floor of this uprising there were various kinds of bloodthirsty monsters and demons. All of them were clearly unhappy to see a person here, which is why they tried to break out of their cramped rooms and attack the main character. The guy was very scared to see all this. Suddenly, bright lightning began to flash in the sky, which began to strike directly into the building. The loud sound of thunder and explosions echoed throughout the area. Soon turned out that these lightning bolts struck only monsters and demons. This seriously injured the evil spirits but did not kill them. Yan, who had already managed to descend to the ground, watched intently what was happening, unable to tear his eyes away. All this really scared the guy. Soon, to his own surprise, the protagonist realized that all these lightning bolts were holding back the monsters in the tower so that they could not escape or harm anyone. From these thoughts, Yanya was distracted by a mysterious female voice, which he had heard once before. The stranger took turns asking if the guy was scared. Turning to the unusual girl who had quietly crept up to him, the main character immediately asked who she was. The stranger with fox ears and many tails behind her back replied that her name was Subjugating, after which she greeted the warden of the underworld prison with a smile. Tens of thousands of years ago, the Eternal Emperor gathered 12 immortals, including Taibai, Taishan, Guanyin, Fuxi, Zhuanu, and others. This was necessary to fuse them together in a tower that suppressed the power of demons, which were the 6 great hells. Through the generations, immortal, furious beasts and sinful gods who committed terrible crimes were thrown into this tower to protect the human world from them. In this prison, all its prisoners suffered soul-searing torture from heavenly lightning day and night for many years. Sudaji continued to say that the token of pardon that was currently in Xia's hand, Yanya was the only one who could open the doors. That is why the guy was called the prison warden. After this, the fox demon asked if the main character wanted to go inside and check on his prisoners. During this walk, the girl promised to tell him everything in more detail. Xiayan, looking at the ancient religion of his family, felt that he had no right to refuse this offer, and therefore confidently agreed. After this, the main character of Revenge with his new acquaintance entered the tower, the entrance to which resembled a real portal to another dimension. The guy easily passed through the magical barrier that prevented the prisoners from going outside, but suddenly stopped when he saw what was happening inside the prison. Xiayan saw many bright lights in front of him, moving at great speed in a chaotic manner. This was probably another protective measure. Suddenly, several lights began to fly rapidly towards our heroes, which looked dangerous. Sudaji immediately warned the new overseer that he should be more careful with this. It seemed that the main character knew perfectly well what he needed to do, so concentrating he released a stream of fiery energy from his golden eye. Surprisingly, it worked perfectly. The energy protecting the prison from intruders disappeared in an instant after colliding with Jia's ability. Yana, who was now safe. Sudaji was very surprised that the guy managed to overcome this obstacle, and she called his ability impressive. The girl said that the flame in the guy's eye was really a fire seed, thanks to which he was able to restart his life. After hearing this, Xiayan assumed that it was the fox demon who spoke to him in his past life. Sudaji proudly said that her connection with the Jia family was very deep, and as a spirit guide through the 6 great hells, she could not just watch as the guy died at the hands of scoundrels. The girl continued to say that the despair and anger of the main character at the moment of death awakened a fiery ability that ignited the fire seed of the lower world, and at that time she simply went with the flow. Now Xiaoyan understood how he was able to be reborn, and besides, he was glad that he was able to awaken the power before the start of the apocalypse. The guy hoped that now everything could be different. The main character did not stay in one place and asked the fox demon to lead him further. The girl was ready to happily carry out the overseer's order. Sudaji continued to say that the 6 great hells were divided into 5 layers, and based on the boy's spiritual power, the illuminated doors showed the limit of his abilities. So far, only one door was dedicated. Looking behind this door, Jiayan was very surprised by who he met behind her. The boy immediately guessed that this huge demon looked exactly like the beast that Shijun rode on in his previous life. The imprisoned beast clearly didn't like the fact that the guy came to stare at him like he was in a zoo, so he immediately decided to show his character and growled loudly. The main character was very scared of this, which is why he froze in place for a moment, unable to even move due to fear. Suddenly, the demon bear noticeably softened when he realized that this guy was their new overseer, whom they had all finally waited for after 1,000 years. He was ready to help the main character in everything. Xiaoyan clearly didn't expect this and was in a bit of shock. At this time, Sudaji was indignant that the shameless black bear was groveling at the sight of the new overseer. However, both demons could not resist and, competing with each other, decided to show how happy they were for the main character. The guy felt very awkward about everything that was happening. Suddenly, from somewhere in the darkness, an ominous voice was heard, which said with obvious displeasure that the 1,000-year-old demon kings had sat in prison for a while and turned into dogs. One of the prisoners continued to say that there was nothing special about the warden, because he simply relied on the relic, and therefore if the guy wanted him to obey him, he should have made the heavenly lightning strike him for another 1,000 years. Approaching the next cell, Xiaoyan thought that first he met Sudaji, and now he also met the black demon bear. This meant that this prison was full of legendary creatures. The main character carefully examined the third prisoner, who did not want to communicate with him, and thought that his appearance was familiar to him. Still, the demon turned to Xiaoyan in order to look at him, thanks to which the guy could find out who he was. The protagonist assumed that this prisoner was the legendary Lei, Genzi, meeting with whom the guy was very impressed. Sudaji was surprised that the new supervisor was able to recognize this demon at first sight, and thought that she should not expect anything else from the capable guy Jia. Yan did not respond to this flattery. The girl continued to tell that in this world, monsters were divided into many ranks. She and the warden were now on the lowest level of the tower, where the general-level criminals were imprisoned. As the tower grew, the strength of the prisoners also increased. There were rumors that immortal sage-level criminals were imprisoned on the upper floors. There were even god-level beings, but they were lost in the flow of time. That's why the warden had to work harder, because he would have to grow in strength in order to subjugate the entire tower. Now the guy was only worried about the fact that this prison was even dirtier than he thought. The main character also thought that even the general-level creatures at the lower level seemed very powerful, so it was difficult for him to imagine who lived at the top. However, the guy quickly pushed away his fears. It didn't matter to him who those monsters were, because they would become part of his power. Xiaoyan had already decided that during the apocalypse he would have to become the strongest. Sudaji also said that with the current level of the guy's spiritual power, the first floor was still his limit, so he needed to absorb more souls to open more doors and go higher. Soon, Xiaoyan returned to the world he was accustomed to, but continued to think that in 3 days, when the gods descended to Earth, his hunt would begin, but for now, he needed to complete the preparations. Soon the main character arrived at the antique street, because in his past life someone came across the connecting thread of the Immortal here and became a powerful bearer of the ability. Xiaoyan looked around carefully, studying the assortment of sellers, and thought that if he was not mistaken, the treasure should now be somewhere here. Luckily for the guy, the energy that came from the antiques could not hide from his eyes with the fire seed of the lower world, so the search process became noticeably easier. At this time, the head of the Song family and also Shijun's father, whose name was Song, were walking down the street. Tian and Elder Huang, who was an appraiser of antiquities. Xia among the people, Yana immediately became interested in what the guy was doing here. Sun Tian immediately remembered telling his son that he should only be friends with useful people. To this, Shijun replied that he was friends with the main character only because he could be easily manipulated. Elder Huang noticed that the man was thinking about something, So he asked if everything was okay. Tian began to assure that everything was fine and suggested that the old man continue searching for antiquities. While the old man was talking about how appraising antiquities was his only skill, the man was thinking about how, after the ceremony of offering to the ancestors, he had a dream in which he was told to go in search of certain things, especially for this son. Tian invited Elder Huang, and it was clearly not in vain that he did so, because the elderly man soon noticed a very interesting thing at one of the cellars. The old man's attention was drawn to the nondescript jug, so he enthusiastically offered it to Sun. "I'm going to take a look at it." Unfortunately for the old man, he did not manage to get what he wanted. Someone had already picked up the jug and asked the seller how much it cost, intending to buy it. The seller was glad that another gullible buyer, Jia, fell for his trick. Yan was already looking forward to making good money from his deception. The man replied that this was a Ming Dynasty gourd flask that cost no less than 10,000. The protagonist was very surprised by such a high price tag and thought that it was too expensive for such a trinket. After this, the guy began to carefully examine the jug from all sides, and even looked inside to make sure that this was exactly what he was looking for. Unexpectedly, the main character announced that there was a crack on the jug, which the seller tied with a piece of thread to hide this defect. That's why Xia Yan thought that this flask was just a fake and was not worth more than 100. These words made the seller very angry, so he snatched the goods from the boy's hands and demanded that he not waste his time anymore. At this point, Elder Huang asked the man for permission to look at the flask. Sun Tian and the antiquities appraiser began to carefully examine the jug, which the seller was very happy about. Meanwhile, Xia Yan was pleased that he had managed to do what he had planned. All this work was done by the main character only for the sake of the red thread, with which the unscrupulous seller tried to hide the defect on his product. The guy was happy about this because no one could have imagined that this ordinary thread was a magical treasure called the Immortal's connecting thread. Xia Yan put the relic in his pocket and then decided it was time for him to enjoy the show. In the past life of the guy, Xia Yun was captured by the Song family, who not only stole the religion but also sacrificed the girl's blood. So the protagonist intended to take revenge on the man. At this time, Elder Huang continued to carefully examine the flask and said that it had a faint trace of spiritual aura, meaning it was a real antiquity. Sun Tian was about to acquire this artifact, but suddenly he heard Jia's voice behind him. Yanya, who was supposedly surprised by their meeting, and asked if he had also come here to admire the antiques. The man was surprised that the main character was also interested in antiquities, after which he remembered that, according to his son, the guy had some ancient religion that they should discuss later. Suddenly, Xia Yan began to loudly speak to the whole street about how the man's family was very rich, so it was unclear why he was buying some kind of flask, after which he assumed that it was very valuable. This was heard by people who soon recognized the famous appraiser Elder Huan, and thanks to this they believed that this flask was indeed very ancient and valuable. Soon there were many people willing to buy this flask at a price much higher than the seller's son initially stated. Tian was very unhappy about this and said that he was the first to notice this relic. The seller was only happy about the increased excitement and invited buyers to place bets, saying that the highest price would win. Everyone immediately began to fulfill this condition. After some time, Sun Tianyu had already managed to get the desired relic, but he had to raise the price by another 70,000, so this purchase did not particularly please him. The man was very unhappy that this jug was only worth 10,000, but because of Jia's intervention, Yana's price has risen so high. Meanwhile, the guy didn't feel guilty about it at all. Suddenly, the protagonist turned to the man and asked if he was really interested in his Song family's relic. Tian confirmed this and asked the guy to show it to her. Xia Yan, without any hesitation, happily took out that very stone from his pocket and showed it to Elder Huang. Elderly man, seeing this relic, was shocked and immediately thought that it was a real treasure, after which he asked if he could take a closer look at this stone. Suddenly, the guy began to hide the relic back in his pocket, while saying that he couldn't just let someone look at this stone, because it was his family's treasure. Then Sun Tian, who was very interested in this thing, began to ask the protagonist for permission to look a little longer, insisting that Shujun was his close friend. The guy replied that he didn't know any Shujun, and then started to leave. The man asked him to stop and asked what he wanted to get in exchange for looking at the relic. The main character didn't think long and answered that he wanted to get money. He sold 1 minute of viewing for 10,000 and 5 minutes for 50, considering this a very good price. Sun Tian was very angry because of the guy's initiative and high prices, but still agreed to pay. After hearing a positive response from Sun Tiana, the protagonist immediately handed over the relic to Elder Huan. At this time, the man was transferring money to the required account with dissatisfaction. While the old man was examining Xia's valuable artifact, Yan started checking his banking app and was soon very pleased with how much money was in his account. The guy had a little more than 50,000 yuan, so the first thing the main character decided to do was stock up on food and water. There were enough empty cells in the prison of the 6 underworlds where supplies could be stored. Using the online application, the guy quickly bought everything he needed and even acquired animals, because everything that fit in the prison cells remained unchanged. Considering the huge expenses, it was not at all surprising that the main character soon ran out of money. This upset him a little. After that, Xiaoyan turned to the man and informed him that his viewing time was over and offered to extend it to Sun. Tian responded by asking if the guy wanted to sell this relic. To the surprise of Song Tian and Elder Huang, the protagonist very easily agreed to this proposal, which could not but please them. However, Jia Yan wanted to get at least 10 million for his valuable family heirloom, considering it a completely acceptable price. At the same time, Elder Huang and Song Tian had a completely different opinion. They were shocked by such a huge amount which they did not even try to hide. Seeing this reaction of Xiaoyan snatched the relic from the disgruntled man's hands, saying along the way that it had been kept in his family for thousands of years and was a real antique. That's why the guy thought that 10 million wasn't that much for such valuable items. After that, Xiaoyan began to leave because he had other things that required his attention. Elder Huang admitted that the guy's relic was indeed very ancient, but it was worth no more than 500,000, so it was worth negotiating with Xia Yanem and reduce the price to hundreds of thousands. Sun Tian was no longer eager to buy this relic, so he thanked the old man for his help and said that he could already leave. The elder did not object. After this, the man called his son and asked him to gather the clan people and immediately find Xia Yana and his sister along with the relic. Sun Tian was very angry with the guy and was therefore ready to resort to radical measures. In addition, the ancestors told him to find not only the relic, but also blood for sacrifice. Xia Yan seemed to sense this threat, but was glad that his assumption turned out to be absolutely correct. Everything was going exactly as the guy had planned, so soon he would definitely get what he wanted. Soon after, the protagonist met with Xia as agreed. Yun, who had already packed her things and was ready to go wherever her brother said. Xiaoyan took his younger sister's things and told her that they would first go home to Xia. Yun was happy about this. Suddenly, the excited class teacher Xia ran up to them. Yun, whose name was Bai Shiyin, asked them to stop. The woman began to ask why her student had suddenly packed up and left, because tomorrow she would have a water exam on which her future depended. To this Xiaoyan, he said that he asked Xia to do it. Yun went home with him, after which he added that his sister had to leave school, for which he asked the teacher for forgiveness. Bai Shiyin was indignant at this because Xia Yun was the best student in the class. She heard that the girl's parents died and that her brother took care of her, but she didn't expect that the guy would be so careless. The woman then said that she did not allow Xia to be taken away. Yun from school had a wonderful future ahead of her that could not be destroyed. The boy tried to explain that his sister was only skipping school for a while, but Bai Shiyin didn't listen to him and loudly said that school couldn't be skipped until the earth exploded. From this speech, Xia Yun and Xiaoyan was shocked and did not know what to say. The class teacher noticed this reaction and realized that she had overdone it with emotions. Because of this, the woman was very embarrassed, but she still continued to say that the students should not have left the school just like that anyway. The main character interrupted her and said that she was a good teacher, and as a sign of gratitude decided to give her one piece of advice for the near future. The guy said that Bai Shiyin, upon returning home, should collect as much food, water, medicine, and weapons as he could in order to survive the coming events. The woman was very surprised by such advice, but she thought that the main character spoke so confidently, he probably knew about the approaching end of the world. After that, our heroes left, leaving the class teacher alone. Bai Shiyin watched them go and hoped that Xia Yun everything will be fine. Soon after, Xiaoyan and Xia Yun was already home and packing their things. The girl asked her brother what they would do next. She also suggested that something serious was about to happen soon. The main character did not lie and confirm this, but promised that he would be able to protect his younger sister. After that, Xiaoyan gave the girl the relic and said that he needed to go outside for a while, after which he asked her not to open the door to anyone. Xia Yun listened to her brother but asked him to come back quickly because she had prepared food for them. The main character was noticeably happy about this. After that, he left the apartment, thinking along the way that while the relic was with his sister, he could always sense where it was. Now the guy needed to get more money. After some time, the main character had already gone down to the first floor and began to approach the exit of the house in order to do what he had planned. Surprisingly, Ruolan was already waiting for him there, and at that time she was talking on the phone asking her interlocutor to go to Jia's home. Yan Yu where probably was, and Xia Yun. Shijun was very pleased to receive this information and asked the girl to somehow detain the protagonist until they arrived. Ruolan immediately began to fulfill this request and, meeting the guy at the entrance, asked if he missed her. She also said that Shijun would soon join them. Xiaoyan didn't respond to this and only pushed the girl aside so that she wouldn't interfere with his passage. Ruolan was simply shocked by what happened. She couldn't believe that the guy rejected her. So without holding back her emotions, she asked him what it all meant. The girl also asked if the main character had really decided to break up with her. She asked him not to act like a child and not to be jealous in vain. Despite these words of Xiaoyan rejected the girl again and said that he was definitely turned on by the mere thought that they were in a relationship. After that, he coldly asked his ex-girlfriend to stay away from him. Ruolan was very angry at these words, so she began to call the guy ungrateful. Xiaoyan decided to play a joke and said that the girl dropped her dignity on the floor, so she should quickly pick it up before it was stepped on. Despite this, Ruolan still wanted to continue the conversation and loudly asked where the guy was going to go while rudely ordering him to come back and talk to her. The main character briefly replied that he was in a hurry because he was going to sell his house right now and showed the property documents as proof of this. Ruolan was very surprised because this was the only house that the guy owned, and it was supposed to be the home for the newlyweds, Jia. Yanhee replied that he needed money and offered the girl to buy it. Ruolan didn't understand what was going on because the guy suddenly started acting cold and now he was selling the house. He got it from his parents and it was worth at least 3 million. Still, the girl was interested in the offer to buy the house, so she asked Jia for how much money. Yan wanted to sell it. Without thinking twice, the main character declared that he would sell this house to his ex-girlfriend for 1 million and would not haggle. Ruolan was very surprised by such a low price, so she immediately assumed that the guy might have gotten into trouble and now he needed money to pay off his debts. Next, Xiaoyan asked directly if the girl wanted to buy this house. Because he was already going to the realtors, Ruolan of course wanted to buy it. But she didn't have that much money with her. 1,000 from her, and she would give the rest later to Xiaoyan did not agree to this proposal and continued to insist on 1 million in cash at once. Then Ruolan thought about the fact that the main character was already dead anyway, and even if she gave him 1 million, she would still return this money very soon. Therefore, the girl accepted Jia's conditions without thinking twice. Yana suggested that he go to a real estate agency right now to complete all the necessary paperwork. Very soon, the ex-boyfriend and girlfriend were in a tall, multi-story building, which housed a real estate agency. Ruolan talked to her mother on the phone and asked her not to worry, because she just wanted to buy a house at a very good price. She also promised that she would soon return the money she borrowed from her. The girl's mother was very unhappy with her daughter because she was dating a poor guy, and now she was spending all their savings on buying his house. Ruolan asked her mother to quickly transfer the money to the right account and assured her that this relationship would soon be over. Soon, Xiaoyan asked if the girl had everything ready, because he agreed to sign the documents only after receiving the entire amount. Ruolan, looking pleased, said that she had already sent the necessary amount. At the same time, the girl thought that the main character would not have time to spend this money anyway, because he had very little time left to live. At this time, Xiaoyan smiled slyly because his plan had worked again. The main character was very happy because he knew that when the apocalypse came, the houses would no longer be worth anything. But without this million, Ruolan would definitely lose all chances of survival. As agreed, immediately after the money arrived in the guy's account, he signed the necessary documents and handed them over to the girl, which made her very happy. After this, Ruolan suggested that the protagonist celebrate this event, which Xiaoyan agreed, thinking that this matter definitely needed to be celebrated. Along with this, his eye began to emit barely noticeable clots of energy. The first day of the main character's second life was already drawing to a close, but this did not mean that he could breathe a sigh of relief and relax. A group of guys armed with baseball bats were heading towards Zia's house. Yanya Shijun recently found out that the guy took his sister there. The noisy scoundrels intended to break into the main character's home while he was away and talk to the girl. At this time, the unsuspecting Xia Yun, as promised, diligently prepared dinner for herself and her older brother. The girl was so carried away by this whole process that she didn't even notice how the relic on her neck began to glow brightly, as if warning of approaching danger. After some time, a group of scoundrels led by Shu Jun were already standing near the right door and preparing to enter the apartment. To do this, the guy knocked loudly on the door and addressed Xia Yun, asked to be let in, saying that he was a good friend of Xia, Yana. The girl, hearing this, immediately headed towards the door and was surprised by Shi Jun's sudden visit. Looking through the peephole, the main character's sister asked why the guy had come here, since her brother was not at home at the moment. To this, Shi Jun smiled slyly and replied that he knew about this very well. He then went on to say that Xia Yan went to buy ingredients for that and asked him to come in early so the girl should open the door quickly. Xia Yun, who had no idea about the impending danger, believed the guy and was already reaching for the door handle to let Shi Jun into the house. At that moment, the girl suddenly remembered the words of the main character, who had recently told her not to open the door no matter who came. Xia Yun apologized to the uninvited guest and, without giving a reason, suggested that Shi Jun wait until her brother returned home. The guy instantly got angry because of this, so he started hitting the door hard with his fist and getting indignant that the girl didn't trust him. At the same time, he demanded an explanation for this. Xia Yun was very surprised by such an inadequate reaction, but only apologized again without explaining anything to the uninvited guest. At this time, one of the group of scoundrels realized that no one would open the door for them, and therefore took out his toolbox. The guy began to pick out a suitable master key while assuring Shu Jun that he shouldn't worry, since such doors could be opened without much difficulty. Anticipating the imminent entry into someone else's house, Shi Jun turned to Xia again with a satisfied expression. Yun asked if she had that ancient family heirloom with her. The naive girl honestly confirmed this by saying that Xia Yan had just recently given this relic to her. The next moment, the door lock was already open, which meant Xia Yun no longer had even this protection from intruders. Shi Jun opened the door with great pleasure, while saying that now he didn't have to worry about anything. Immediately after this, several armed scoundrels broke into the apartment with bad intentions, which really scared Xia Yun. One of the guys quickly grabbed the girl so that she wouldn't have time to run away or do anything against them. Shi Jun, watching everything from the side, began to insist that everything could have turned out differently if Xia Yun voluntarily opened the door earlier. After that, the guy took the relic from the girl, believing that it was exactly what his father wanted to get. Along the way, he made fun of Xia Yan believes that he will soon be on his knees and apologizing. Xia Yun, who managed to escape from the villain's grasp for a short time, asked why Shi Jun did all this since he and the main character were best friends. To this, the guy with a crazy smile on his face replied that he was friends with Xia. I only did it because he was an idiot who could be used as a scapegoat if necessary. Xia Yun was shocked to hear this answer because before she had no idea that Shi Jun was such a scoundrel. The smug guy also said that thanks to the main character he met Ruolan, who soon really liked him, Xia Yun didn't want to dry all this and demanded to let her go. The next moment, Shi Jun decided to punish the girl for her insolence, and so he hit her in the face with all his might. Then the guy asked Xia Yun to behave more quietly, otherwise he would have to repeat what he did. All his friends were very pleased with what they saw. After this, the villain had bad thoughts about the girl, which they intended to immediately put into practice, which frightened Xia very much. Yun. At that moment, a bright light appeared out of nowhere, and a mysterious female voice addressed the guys and asked if they had ever heard of the lake of wine and the meat forest. A moment later, all the scoundrels found themselves waist-deep in warm water, surrounded by beautiful girls who were paying attention to them. All the guys were very surprised by this. All this took place in a large pond in the middle of a beautiful forest. Unfamiliar girls were happy to serve their guests. Several strangers had already cut the juicy piece of meat into slices so that the guys could eat it. Shi Jun was the first to be lucky enough to taste meat from the hands of a beauty, who at the same time called him king. The guy couldn't believe that all this was happening in reality. After this, the girl immediately asked if the king liked the meat she offered. Shi Jun was delighted and asked for more. The mysterious stranger was very happy to hear this, and perceived these words as the highest praise. Suddenly, an ominous aura appeared around the girl and her eyes began to glow brightly red. She told the guy that he had just eaten his own meat, which is why he liked it so much. The next moment, the villains finally realized that something was wrong around them. They were very scared by the bloody water that was everywhere, but the most frightening thing was that some of the guys had already had their hearts cut out alive. Looking around, instead of beautiful girls, they saw lifeless skeletons hanging from the trees. The name Lake Wine and Meat Forest was a perfect description of this place. It turned out that all this was the work of the demon Sudaji, who with her sinister appearance also offered the villains to taste other parts of each other's bodies. The villains who broke into the main character's apartment fell under the influence of the illusion created by Sudaji and were now almost dying of fear after what they had experienced. Xia Yun, who was watching what was happening from the side, was also very scared because she did not understand at all what was happening. The villains immediately assumed that they had seen a ghost who had deceived them. Shijun insisted that they had all once killed people, so they would not be afraid of such a creature. After that, the guy started to take out that very family heirloom of Jia from his pocket. Yana considered that it was in her that the monster lived. Shijun, unable to contain his emotions, he began to loudly curse at the stone, threatening to break it now and then the monster inside would definitely die. Suddenly, the relic seemed to react to these threats and began to emit a bright light while releasing ominous energy, which once again frightened Shijun. The next moment, a demon's clawed hand burst out of the stone, intending to attack the villain. Several deep scratches remained on Shijun's face, which caused him incredible pain. Because of this, the guy immediately forgot about the relic and dropped it from his hands. The stone bounced off the floor several times with a loud crash and rolled towards the exit door. Just at that moment, the owner of the apartment returned home, and the relic fell at his feet. Xia Yan immediately picked up the valuable artifact, which perfectly fulfilled its mission of protecting his sister from intruders. The main character was very pleased with this result and joked that it was very noisy in his apartment, as if he did not understand what could have happened there. The villains, seeing the guy, were shocked by his sudden appearance and also by the fact that he fearlessly took this stone in his hands. Besides, Jia Yanya came here, and Ruolan, who seeing the state Shijun was in, was very afraid for him. Frightened girl immediately ran to her boyfriend and began asking if everything was okay with him. Shijun did not spend much time explaining everything and ordered his comrades to take the valuable relic from the main character. At that very moment, the villains seemed to forget about what had happened to them not so long ago, and grabbing baseball bats, decided to carry out the order of their leader. The next moment, a group of guys fearlessly rushed towards Xia Yanya, who was not at all afraid of this and continued to stand in one place. At this time, the worried Sudaji warned the protagonist that the token's spiritual power had been exhausted because Lei Genzi rushed out and scratched that bastard. The demon bear couldn't do anything either. Xia Yan wasn't worried about this at all and said that now it was his turn to protect his sister and the family heirloom because he just wanted to test his abilities. The next moment, a stream of scorching flame burst from the protagonist's golden eye and headed towards the villains. The guys who burst into the apartment were instantly engulfed in flames, which made them very scared, because they could not have expected something like this. The villains experienced incredible pain, and no matter how hard they tried, they could not put out the flames. Some of them even managed to run into the shower and stand under the stream of cold water, but this did not help them at all. The fire continued to rage on their clothes. Soon, everyone who was touched by the fire died in terrible agony, and only after that, the flame disappeared. Shijun, who was watching what was happening from the side, was very scared and did not understand how this was possible. After this, the excited guy turned to the main character and, trembling with fear, asked if he really knew how to use magic. Ruolan was also very frightened by what was happening and demanded that Xiaoyan did not approach them and insisted that they were good friends to him. The main character was amused by the fact that the girl said such things, because Shijun had recently snuck into his house and taken his sister hostage, intending to steal a family heirloom. Shijun pretended that he didn't understand what Xia was talking about. Yan tried to explain that everything that happened here was just a misunderstanding. After that, the guy, hiding the knife behind his back, asked Ruolan to talk to the main character because she was his girlfriend, whom he was soon going to marry. Ruolan turned to Xia Yana and reminded him that he really was going to marry her. Then she said that she didn't even need a ransom and she was ready to marry him. After this, the girl in a gentle voice asked the main character to tell her where he got such magical power from, promising that she would love him forever. At this moment, Shijun drew his hidden knife and rushed towards Jia with a scream. Yana intends to kill him right here and now. The main character never lost his concentration for a moment and did not succumb to the sweet talk of the lying girl, so he was able to react in time and use his power again. The next moment, a bright flame enveloped Shijun and Ruolan, intending to burn them just like those scoundrels. At this time, Xiaoyan calmly watched what was happening and thought about why he had awakened the ability to use fire. Looking at the dying trembling of the burning bodies, it finally dawned on the main character, and now he knew the answer to this question. The guy assumed that it was all because there were too many dirty creatures like his friends in this world, and so he was going to burn them all to the ground. Meanwhile, quite a lot of people had gathered at the Song family temple to perform the obligatory service and honor their ancestors. Sun Tian stood before the altar and respectfully addressed his ancestors and asked them to bless the Song family. Nothing happened. Only the smoke from the burning sticks slowly rose high up. Then the man said that the wind and rain died down, getting stronger step by step. Immediately after this, the stone tablet that stood on the altar began to study energy, and a mysterious aura formed around it. From this energy a spirit emerged, which began to tell the man that in order for him to descend to earth, he needed an artifact of spiritual energy and the blood of a young girl as a sacrifice. Sun Tian assured the spirit of his ancestors that he would fulfill the order and that his son would soon prepare the much-needed gift for him. The spirit continued in an ominous voice saying that the end of the world would come within 3 days, so the man had to hurry. Sun Tian was very surprised by these words and wanted to find out more about it, but the spirit of his ancestor had already disappeared. The man soon realized how serious the statement was, which made him very anxious. Without wasting a minute, the head of the clan turned to his subordinates and ordered them to immediately go and buy food and water, because the day of judgment was approaching. The man also asked to contact Shijun and tell him to urgently bring people to sacrifice them to the ancestors. At that moment, the gates that led to the temple grounds opened with a roar, which greatly frightened the people present with its unexpectedness. Xia walked confidently into the temple grounds. Yan threw Shijun's body to the ground while saying that the head of the Song clan had no need to worry so much. The main character himself came here and brought with him the body of Song's son. Tian, everyone present, was very surprised, and for a while they couldn't believe that Shijun was actually dead. Sun Tian was very angry that the guy dared to just barge into the temple of his family's ancestors, as if he mistook this place for some kind of passable establishment. Next, Sun Tian, in a fit of anger, mercilessly ordered all his subordinates to immediately kill the main character. Everyone present immediately began to carry out the order of the clan leader. Several guys with bare hands rushed toward Xia Yan, intending to teach him a lesson for his defiant behavior in a place sacred to them. At the same time, the main character was absolutely calm and concentrated hard in order to defeat his opponents as quickly as possible. The next moment, the guy suddenly opened his eyes and released the accumulated energy, which was accompanied by the study of the bright light from his golden eye. The protagonist looked forward as if time was slowing down, and clearly saw a core of warmth in the heads and chests of people who were quickly approaching him with ill intentions. Xia Yan was fully prepared for the fight and intended to demonstrate his skills to these people and the head of the Song clan. The next moment, the main character rushed towards the crowd of villains and, deftly dodging their blows, rushed forward with lightning speed, simultaneously setting all his opponents on fire with scorching fire. After just a couple of seconds, Xia Yan walked calmly towards Song Tianyu, who was amazed by what he had just seen and did not understand how this was even possible. The protagonist greeted the head of the Song clan with a smile on his face, while behind him his opponents were burning alive and writhing in pain. Sun Tian was very angry at the guy for allowing himself to behave like that in the temple of his family's ancestors, and it seemed like he already had a backup plan. The next moment, the man pulled out a hidden pistol from his belt and pointed it at the main character, intending to kill him right then and there. However, Xia Yan had nothing to fear because he could clearly feel the core of heat inside the pistol, which meant he could disarm the man. To do this, the main character only needed to snap his fingers and use his abilities. At that moment, the gun was in Sun's hand. Tian was torn apart by a small explosion, simultaneously wounding a man with shrapnel. Xia Yan, looking at how the wounds on the hands of the head of the Song clan were oozing blood, said with great pleasure that the man should not have played with firearms. After that, the guy thought that although his abilities were only at the first stage, he could simultaneously control 10 gallons of fire with a range of up to 2 meters for 10 seconds. Meanwhile, a worried Sun Tian quickly crawled to the altar and addressed the spirit of his ancestors, calling the main character a devil's spawn along the way. The man told the spirit that the Song family was on the verge of destruction and asked him to show his holiness because the lineage of their clan could not be interrupted. Hearing this, the spirit became very angry and loudly declared that he was an ancient constellation of fire named Inho and now intended to cut off the source of evil monsters. After this, the spirit sent several streams of fire straight at the main character, who clearly did not expect this. Xia Yan was shocked, and after Ying Huo's attack, he almost fell to the ground thinking about what he should do next. Meanwhile, Sun Tian noticed that his wounded hands no longer hurt, which surprised him greatly. In addition, all the male subordinates who suffered because of the main character felt good. Head of the Song clan understood that now the advantage was on his side in advance. Therefore, he confidently declared that the righteous God was destroying evil, and therefore Xia Yan's end has come. The next moment, the protagonist saw in front of him the very same patron spirit of the Song family, who had taken physical form and was now simply enormous in size. Xia Yan was surprised that the Song family had their own prophet of the end of the world. Initially, the guy wanted to steal a few ancient things and earn some money, but he never expected to meet such an opponent. Inho had no intention of talking to the main character and, intending to quickly rid the Song family of the threat, tried to crush the guy with his foot. Fortunately, Xia Yan managed to jump aside in time and avoid being hit by the fire spirit's destructive attack. However, Inho wasn't going to stop there and quickly attacked the guy with his hand before he could react. The next moment, a loud sound from the spirit's huge hand colliding with the ground echoed throughout the area. Sun Tian, who was watching what was happening from the side, was very happy to see all this and was sure that after this, the main character would definitely die. However, the man's enthusiasm quickly evaporated when he saw what happened next. It turned out that Xia Yan was not hurt at all, and now looked at his opponent with a satisfied grin on his face. Next to him was a demon bear, who had already bared his sharp teeth in order to help the warden cope with the danger. Xia Yan, standing on a fierce bear, addressed Song I Pulled and asked whom he had already managed to bury. A few moments before, Su Daji had approached the boy and told him that the Firestar Lord had accumulated a lot of power over 1,000 years and was one step away from descending to the earth. The girl was sure that if the main character managed to capture and absorb this spirit, he would be able to strengthen his fire abilities and the power of Xia's soul. Yana was interested in this prospect. The fox demon continued to say that the great crime token currently lacked soul power, but if the guy dared to take the risk, he would have a chance to win. Xia Yan wasted no time in asking what all this meant and what he should do. Su Daji replied that the guy could extract his own soul power and pour it into the great crimes token, after which he could give the order and call one of the prisoners for help. Xia Yan agreed that he could indeed do this, but he believed that if he could not restore his soul in time, then the demon he summoned would be able to escape from prison. Su Daji did not deny this. It was precisely from this perspective that the girl asked whether the protagonist was ready to take the risk. The guy already had some idea, so he confidently answered that anyone would take the risk, but definitely not him. The next moment, the protagonist concentrated energy in her golden eye and directed a bright beam straight at the relic. Su Daji was very afraid that this could somehow harm the artifact, so she immediately asked in an excited voice what Xia Yan has an idea. The protagonist told the prisoners that he had put hellfire into the token, and if he died, this fire would destroy the relic, the artifact to the demons and sinful gods. The guy continued to say that, without the token, no one in the world would be able to open this prison, and all the prisoners would never see the sun's rays again. That is why the main character confidently asked them to help him return alive, because he was sure that the demons already knew well what needed to be done. Immediately after this, Xia Yan separated parts of his soul and sent it into the relic, which was accompanied by a stormy flow of energy similar to lightning strikes. Because of this, in the world of the six great hells, a bright beam of light suddenly appeared in the sky, illuminating the multi-story prison. The prisoners, seeing this from their windows, immediately understood that this was their path to freedom, and therefore began to loudly ask the warden to release them all. Xia's silhouette appeared in the sky. Yan, who loudly called upon the spirit of the black demon bear guarding Mount Luoja in the South Sea, asked him to come fight side by side with him. The demon bear immediately responded to this call and prepared to carry out the overseer's order. The cage that held the mountain spirit began to slowly rise, allowing it to finally emerge after 1,000 years of imprisonment. After this, the bear flew out of prison with great joy. Su Daji asked him not to be stupid and not to forget that the main character should not die under any circumstances. Without wasting time, the black bear jumped high into the sky in order to pass through the portal and find himself in the world of people. After this, the two, unable to contain their rage, attacked Ying Ho in order to carry out the order and protect Xia from him. Yana the fire spirit never expected this demon to appear. The black bear was very happy that he was finally free and did not intend to hold back his emotions about this, while Inho sat aside and tried to comprehend what was happening. For some time, the demon bear was surprised at how bright and clear it was in this world, completely forgetting about why the main character had summoned him. Xiaoyan quickly calmed the demon down, ordering him to get to work immediately because the strength of his soul would not last long. I also assumed that the bear wanted him dead. The demon bear immediately began to assure that he had always been loyal to the overseer, and therefore the guy did the right thing by calling him. Inho with all his might, while saying that the low-grade fire spirit was no match for the mountain god. Inho tried to use his skills to summon fire, but was quickly hit in the face by a ferocious bear. The demon was very unhappy that the weak spirit of fire was still trying to resist him, so he did not spare any effort on him and did not intend to spare him. Soon, Inho seemed to begin to disappear. This worried him greatly, because his true body had crossed the line and he was no longer able to use all his powers, which meant he had to retreat. Suddenly, a rope wrapped around the fire spirit's neck and began to pull him to the side. It turned out that the main character predicted that Inho would try to escape, and therefore immediately used the rope that tied the immortals. A moment later, the two fires were completely pinned down and lay on the ground, unable to escape from the demon bear and the protagonist. Sun Tian, who had been watching everything from the beginning to the end, could not believe that the Firestar Lord had been defeated by Jia, Yan, and the demon bear he summoned. Suddenly the man noticed a jug that he had recently purchased on an antique street at a very inflated price. The head of the clan immediately remembered that this jug was tied with a red rope, which the main character apparently took unnoticed and was now using it against the spirit. Xia Yan confirmed this with a satisfied expression and said that thanks to Song Tian's righteousness, he was able to obtain the rope that bound the immortals. The man looked with tears in his eyes at the spirit of fire, whom the main character had captured, while blaming himself for the fact that he had lost. Along with this, the ruler of the Firestar was already turning into pure energy, losing his true appearance. Soon all this energy was transformed into a small crystal, which the main character so desired to obtain. Xia Yan, being very pleased with himself, happily took this crystal for himself, rejoicing at another victory over the enemy. After that, the guy didn't worry about anything anymore. He turned to Sun Tianu and offered to discuss one deal with him. One of the conditions of this deal was Shi Jun, who, although seriously wounded, remained alive because the main character still needed him. Xia Yan directly asked the man how much he was willing to pay to preserve the Song family's offspring. Sun Tian was very pleased with the main character for boldly setting conditions for him, but now the man was in a losing position and could not argue. After some time, Xia Yan and the demon bear disappeared, and the head of the Song clan was already hugging his son. Shi Jun really hoped that his father would not give all the money of their clan to the main character. The guy was very afraid that in this case, they would become nobody. Sun Tian replied that there was no point in money because the end of the world was approaching, and the most important thing for a person was to preserve life. The man then ordered his subordinates to sell all the real estate and buy food and water, and then take everything to the bunker in his country villa. They also had to contact Elder Huang and buy up all of Song's old items. Qian He believed that thanks to this, the children of the Song family would be able to gain abilities and survive the end of the world. After this, the man, full of rage, swore that he would do everything possible to turn the main character's life into a real hell. Meanwhile, Xia Yan walked around the city as if nothing had happened and looked into shops, because his preparations for the end of the world were not yet complete. At that moment, the main character received a message on his phone that almost 30 million had been deposited into his bank account. The guy was pleased and thought that if it weren't for the lack of time, he would have been able to find out much more about the Song family, but now efficiency was his top priority. Then the main character went into the pharmacy and said that he would like to buy 1,000 Shanking pills. The girl was amazed because it was a common medicine for reducing fat and disinfecting poison. Xia Yan did not explain anything, and only asked if they would sell him what he wanted. The worried girl replied that the delivery of such a quantity of medicine could take 2 days. The main character, having heard this, promised to add another 20% on top if he received his order tomorrow evening. The girl began to assure that everything would be done. After that, the guy continued his walk, thinking along the way that there were only 10,000 Shanking pills in Fei Kui, but the largest number of them were posted on the internet. Xia Yan couldn't help but be amazed that for him, on the eve of the end of the world, the most important material would be the most unremarkable medicine like these pills. The guy remembered how in his past life he became very ill and even thought that he would die from it. Xia Yun apologized to her brother and regretted that she had not stocked up on Shangqing pills in advance because they helped speed up the awakening of abilities and were effective in suppressing the zombie virus. After this, the girl decided to go to the pharmacy to look for this medicine in order to help her brother, despite the fact that he asked her not to leave because it was dangerous outside. Xiaoyan recalled that then his younger sister left forever because very soon she was captured by the people of the Song clan. While thinking about this, the main character didn't even notice how he had already come home. The guy saw that now he had nothing to worry about because Jia Yun was alive and sleeping peacefully. Nevertheless, the guy was determined and did not want what happened to the girl in his past life to happen again. Then the guy continued to think about the fact that the Song clan already knew about the approaching end of the world and therefore they were stocking up on food. However, they had no idea that the most important resource in the early stages of the end of the world were people who had awakened abilities. That's why the protagonist believed that by obtaining the Shangqing pills, he would master a multitude of abilities that would make him like an entire army. Don't waste time. Xiaoyan took the family heirloom in his hand and began to absorb the energy of the fire spirit to strengthen his skills. The next moment, a huge stream of raging energy was released from the stone, which took the form of a lotus flower. Soon the main character managed to absorb all this energy into his golden eye, as evidenced by the drawing of the same lotus flower on his pupil. Sudaji congratulated the warden on absorbing the fire spirit and reported that the boy's hellfire skill had been successfully upgraded to scarlet lotus fire, which could break barriers and destroy laws. The girl also reported that Jia's abilities Yan's had also been upgraded to the second level, and he could now control the shape of the fire more precisely. The boy immediately tried it out by creating a fire sword in his hands. Xia Yan practiced a little more with his new ability, while being surprised that the spirit of fire turned out to be much more useful than he had previously thought. Suddenly, the demon bear approached the guy, who continued to rejoice that he had finally managed to get out of the cage and, in addition, his karma of sins had decreased thanks to helping the warden. The main character quickly got tired of such excessive attention from the prisoners, so he pushed them away from himself and asked them not to interfere with his thinking. Lei approached the guy. Genzi said that it was better for him not to call him because he definitely would not help in any way and would simply escape from prison. To this Xiaoyan, he replied that as his abilities grew, he would be able to open a much larger chamber and therefore summon much more powerful evil spirits, so he did not need the services of the Child of Thunder. Said with great confidence that the time will come when Lei Genzi will have to beg him to summon this demon. After this, the main character returned to the human world and began to think about his pressing problems. Xiaoyan looked at the moon, which already looked strange, and thought that tomorrow would be the penultimate day before the end of the world, so he had to hurry and buy one more necessary thing. The next day came. The main character, without wasting time, went to the jewelry exhibition because that very necessary thing was located there. For some time, the guy walked around the spacious hall and looked at the exhibits presented at the exhibition until he found what he needed. Xiaoyan thought that the ore that was currently hidden behind the glass contained a large amount of ability strain, enough to increase his skill from the second to the third degree. In a past life, one lucky guy got this raw stone and advanced ahead of everyone else, gaining countless advantages. This time, the protagonist wanted to be that lucky guy. Meanwhile, in a separate spacious hall, an auction was taking place. People were actively making big bets in order to buy precious items. The next exhibit was a rough stone that had enormous potential. The girl said that this ore contained jadeite, which was valued at no less than 5 million. Soon the bidding began. At first, the price was 3 million, but the people sitting in the hall quickly raised the price to 4 million. Unexpectedly, one of the guests raised the price to 5 million. Everyone present was very surprised by this, but quickly realized that nothing else should have been expected from Hao because Ihao was a real asset. Group. Hao thanked everyone for their support and invited them to have a drink together next time. It seemed that the bidding was over, but suddenly someone offered a price of 6 million. Surprised, Hao immediately turned to the side and saw Jiayana, whom he had never seen before. The girl who was sitting next to him assumed that he was some student. Meanwhile, the administrator approached the main character and timidly informed him that they had a membership system and that in order to participate in the auction he had to have a black bank card. Xiaoyan didn't argue with this and showed his gold bank card, asking along the way if the man had any more questions for him. The administrator let the guy go ahead with a smile, thinking along the way that there should have been at least several tens of millions on the black card, and the unknown guy had a gold card. which was very surprising. The girl who was running the auction informed those present that the young man had placed a bid of 6 million, so now she was interested in whether anyone was ready to continue the bidding. Hao, without thinking twice, raised the price to 7 million, hoping that the main character would show him his character for the sake of their next meeting. After that, Xia Yan, without a moment's hesitation, raised the price to 10 million, without telling anyone anything else. Everyone present was very surprised by such a rate, because this price was much higher than the cost of the unprocessed stone, but Hao was the most shocked of all. The girl who was sitting next to him thought that the guy shouldn't be angry, because the main character was just pretending to be a rich man and nothing more. Suddenly Hao turned to his opponent and asked him what his name was. Xia. Yan told the guy his name without hesitation. After that, Hao praised the main character and said that he would remember him because he was very cool. After some time, Xia Yan was already taking the valuable thing he needed so much. The guy was incredibly happy that he was finally able to get it, because this ore guaranteed him an excellent future. After this, the main character was about to leave and finally heard that the next lot was a glazed glass fan, which delighted everyone present with its beauty. Attention to it, but soon he heard people screaming behind him, asking to save them because a real monster had appeared here. Turning back, Xia Yan saw frightened people who were trying to escape from some kind of entity that was emitting ominous energy around itself. The main character managed to examine this monster in detail. It was a large, aggressive snake with a human head. It seemed that this entity appeared directly from the fan. Xia Yan was very surprised by this, because he could not have expected that such an otherworldly creature could appear here out of the blue. The guy immediately assumed that the monster had come for him, because before the auction, the fan had probably been lying very close to the uncut stone and had absorbed some of the abilities contained in it. In addition, the main character believed that since the end of the world was approaching, supernatural events and the appearance of monsters and spirits were only a precursor to this. Along with this, Hao, who was not going to just run away, took his folding club in his hand and rushed towards the monster, intending to defeat her in a fair fight. However, the guy's hopes were not justified at all, because the monster was able to easily knock his weapon out of his hands without even stopping and continuing its way to Xia Yanu. Hao was shocked by what was happening, but he was even more worried about the main character, because it was towards him that the monster that suddenly appeared was heading. However, the guys shouldn't worry, because Xia Yan had already managed to stop this creature with just one hand, which meant that it no longer posed any danger to him. To break free with all its might, but the protagonist's strong grip was much stronger and nipped all these attempts in the bud. The guy decided not to stay here for long, so he quickly began to concentrate energy in his golden eye in order to quickly deal with this problem. The next moment, a bright flame completely enveloped the monster, intending to burn it so that the creature would not harm anyone else. Very soon, the otherworldly creature completely disappears, and instead of it, a small energy crystal is formed which could absorb Xia Yan. His neck lately, but Xia Yan felt that the cultivation level of this evil spirit was not high, so he only managed to obtain a small ability. After that, the guy began to go about his business as if nothing had happened, while Hao, unable to believe what he had just seen, fell to his knees, trying to comprehend what had happened. Suddenly, the guy began to admiringly call the main character a real master and showed a desire to bow to him as a mentor. Meanwhile, in front of the house where Xia lived, Yan gathered a lot of people. They were all surprised by the number of boxes and cages with animals that were delivered for one of the residents. People knew that Xia bought all of this. Yan couldn't believe that he had become rich. Someone assumed that the guy was going to start his own business. Everyone knew him as a good person, so they supported him. However, one grumpy woman believed that Xia Yana is just an arrogant boy who will certainly have no luck with his endeavor. She was skeptical about the idea that the main character was going to start his own business because she was sure that he was not capable of opening even a small store. Suddenly, one of the girls asked Aunt Zhang if she really wanted to rent the Xia family's warehouse earlier. Yana, and open your own supermarket here. The woman confirmed this, but said that she quickly changed her mind about the idea because she considered it a bad place for her business. Meanwhile, the main character had already approached his house, not paying attention to people, and was completely immersed in his thoughts about what else he should buy. Suddenly, one of the movers turned to the guy and said that they had already delivered everything he ordered and asked him to count everything. The worker also said that another car with goods would arrive tomorrow, but it might not fit here. Xia Yan replied that in that case, he would pick up everything from the central warehouse and deliver it himself. Aunt Zhang was very angry when she heard that another car would arrive for the guy tomorrow, and she couldn't believe that Xiaoyan really did get rich. She was clearly jealous of him. The woman did not understand how the guy could get rich because he was an orphan without a father and mother. She was also angry because the main character was going to open a supermarket in a place that she liked. Zhang, all this time, really wanted to go to the toilet, so he couldn't think of anything better than to relieve himself in Xiaoyan's warehouse. The little child, not at all embarrassed by the owner of the warehouse, who was very close, entered the room and began to do his business. The little child breathed a sigh of relief when he managed to expel the accumulated fluid from his body. The surprising thing is that Aunt Zhang did not scold the boy at all for this prank, but on the contrary, she was happy and praised him for his independence. The woman then turned to Xiaoyan as if nothing had happened, said that the baby was still very immature, and therefore she hoped that the guy would not object. However, the main character had his own opinion. He did not tolerate such treatment and therefore grabbed the child by the clothes to roughly drag him aside. After that, the guy, without any qualms of conscience, threw the child straight at Aunt Zhang, which greatly shocked her. The boy started crying loudly and the woman started scolding the main character and saying that the child just decided to play a little, and therefore he shouldn't have treated him like that. To this, Xiaoyan briefly replied that he was serious and therefore the woman should not get involved with him. After this, the main character closed his warehouse from the inside because he no longer intended to talk to the inadequate woman. Because of all this, Aunt Zhang became even more angry. Meanwhile, the capricious child, seeing how other children were playing with firecrackers, also wanted to blow something up. Hearing this, the woman instantly calmed down and thought about something. She had some kind of idea. Soon she took the child by the hand and dragged him along, saying that she would buy him a lot of firecrackers, and that in the evening they would put on an amazing show. Smiling slyly, thought that if some spark got into the warehouse and a fire started, it would not be very good for Jia. Yana. Meanwhile, the main character was still in his warehouse, and after looking through the boxes, he realized that everything he needed was already here, which couldn't help but make him happy. Without wasting time, the guy, using the relic and his ability, turned to the Tower of Demon Pacification and ordered it to collect all his things. At that very moment, a large portal appeared in the middle of the room, which began to suck in all the boxes that were in this warehouse. From the human world, all these things went straight to the entrance of the prison, which made Sudaji very happy, who thought that now she would finally be able to eat her fill. After this, the main character ordered the girl to find empty cells and put all the things there. The demon fox was very happy to fulfill the warden's order and asked him not to worry about anything. The girl also said that since the guy had a lot of animals, he could allocate a plot of land next to the tower to keep them, and if they were fed with the tower's aura, the meat would become even tastier. Xiaoyan was still worried because the end of the world was approaching, and he did not know how long it would last. He sent here more animals that could be used to preserve human civilization. Suddenly, the demon bear said that the guy should take up cultivating the land, because during a crop failure, the most important thing for living creatures was the land and seeds. The main character had already bought enough seeds, but he was very worried about the condition of the land around the tower. Xiaoyan suddenly jumped up and went back to the human world because he already knew what he had to do. The main characters found themselves in the suburbs and looking around, thinking about whether the demon tower could accommodate so much land. The guy didn't spend much time guessing and decided to find out everything in practice. So with the help of his ability, he began to absorb the earth and direct it to the other world. At this time, Sudaji watched in horror as a huge amount of earth fell from the sky onto her, which greatly frightened her and made her ask the warden to stop. The girl warned that the main character's soul power was insufficient, and because of this, the space around the tower was too small. At this rate, he could simply bury them all here. Looking around Xiaoyan, he estimated that he had collected at least 20,000 jins of land, but he still doubted whether it would be enough. The guy knew well that after the end of the world, everything that covered the earth would be unusable, and the now beautiful land that had not yet been subjected to the anomaly would become a great rarity the day after tomorrow. That is why the main character felt that he could not waste a single minute, and therefore he was determined to increase his spiritual power right now. Xiaoyan began to diligently absorb the energy of the fire spirit, which took him some time. At this time, Aunt Zhang, as she promised her grandson, bought a lot of firecrackers in order to put on a wonderful show. The treacherous woman looked at the gunpowder products with a satisfied expression and thought about how much she wanted to see Jia die. Yana. Suddenly, a joyful grandson ran up to her, holding something in his hands, asking his grandmother to look at this object. Aunt Jung was surprised to realize that it was a mirror and asked where the child got it from. The woman praised the boy for giving her gifts at such a young age. Suddenly, a small child, surrounded by an ominous aura, declared that there was someone in the mirror. The woman was very surprised by this, not understanding what the boy was talking about, and in the meantime, he had already pushed the mirror right up to her face. The next moment, Aunt Jang was horrified to discover in the mirror an image of a terrible monster that was looking straight at her. The woman was so scared that she couldn't even stand on her feet. She thought it was a real ghost and asked her grandson to immediately remove the mirror from her. However, the child seemed out of his mind and continued to push the mirror towards his grandmother, saying that she loved to look in the mirror. Aunt Jang was terribly frightened by what was happening and asked the child to stop it. But in the meantime, the mirror had already begun to emit ominous energy. The next moment, the same monster began to crawl out of the mirror and, baring its sharp teeth, headed towards the frightened woman. Very soon, an ominous energy seemed to enter Aunt Jang, causing her to begin to behave unnaturally. At this time, the possessed child laughed because he considered everything that was happening to be very funny and suggested that his grandmother play something else. Suddenly, the ominous energy began to leave the little boy, thanks to which he came to his senses and began to behave more adequately. However, the child was still in danger because this energy had entered Aunt Jang, who was now asking the boy to come closer, and in an ominous voice said that she loved him very much. Run away as quickly as possible, but the otherworldly entity grabbed him, preventing him from doing what he had planned. That night, strange phenomena occurred throughout the city. Many spirits and ghosts walked the streets of the metropolis, greatly frightening people. It seemed that all this evil spirits had not reached the port warehouse. One of the workers, heading about his business, noticed the sky and assumed that a downpour was coming. The man also noticed a ship approaching the port. He remembered that it was recently reported that one of the ships had caught a strange fish in the sea. The sailors were surprised that the fish's body was covered in pus and that a bunch of sharp fangs were sticking out of its mouth. The men assumed that all this was due to the discharge of wastewater into the sea, which provoked a mutation. Meanwhile, a warehouse worker entered the room and, looking at his watch, informed his colleague that it was almost time. I didn't get any answer. The man told his boss that he came here for supplies and expected to receive them. Suddenly, he noticed the man's hand, which had a strange color and was shaking violently as if from the cold. The man looked like he was in a lot of pain, so his colleague asked him if he was okay and if he needed help. The man looked like he was in a lot of pain, so his colleague asked him if he was okay and if he needed help. The guy then suggested that his colleague had caught a cold and advised him to ask his boss for a vacation in order to have a good rest and recover. The guy was distracted from this conversation by the loud footsteps of people in black suits behind him, who were approaching him ever closer. The guy turned around and saw the men. He seemed to recognize them, but was not entirely happy to see them there. Suddenly, one of them asked if all the Shangking pills were in this warehouse. The guy replied that all of this product had already been purchased by the client. Then the man ordered his subordinates to quickly take everything out of here. The men immediately began to carry out their boss's orders, while the warehouse worker did not understand what was happening and asked them to stop. In order not to listen to the guy's objections any longer, the man with the scar on his face pushed him aside. The guy couldn't stay on his feet and fell right on top of his colleague, who was feeling unwell. After this, the man again ordered his subordinates to quickly take everything out of this warehouse. As soon as the man started to leave, one of the warehouse workers suddenly grabbed him by the leg, as if preventing him from doing what he had planned. The guy grabbed the man's leg so hard that he started bleeding. The man himself was unable to keep his balance and began to fall to the ground. Looking at the warehouse worker who detained him, the man saw that his skin had changed color and sharp, long claws had grown on his hands. At the same time, the guy was growling and looked quite aggressive. The other men in black suits took this as a serious threat and, armed with whatever came to hand, prepared to fight back against the possessed guy. The men severely beat the warehouse worker and freed their boss from his grasp. The man with the scar on his face was very excited after what he had experienced and looked at the guy with incomprehension, not even guessing what could have happened to him. Very soon the man himself began to feel unwell, but despite the worries of his subordinates, he insisted that he first take the medicine before anyone else interfered with them again. Suddenly the men heard an unfamiliar voice asking if they had talked about him. It turned out that it was Xia Yan, who continued to say that all of this belonged to him because he did not spend his own money on it. The guy was not happy that the men wanted to steal all of this. Then the main character, with a smile on his face, suggested that although the end of the world had not yet come, men were already in a hurry to die. Then the man said that this entire logistics port belonged to his boss, and since the main character's goods were still in this port, the guy could sell it to them at a good price. Xia Yan, walking forward, briefly replied that he had no intention of selling anything. After this, he added that he gave the men 10 minutes to leave on their own. Otherwise, he would not be responsible for the consequences. Then the main character noticed a worker at the port warehouse who was lying on the floor and was surprised that zombies were already appearing, which indicated the imminent approach of the end of the world. The men were not prepared to tolerate Jia's arrogant attitude. Yana therefore prepared to grab him. One of the men tried to suddenly attack the main character, but he managed to simply disappear from sight in the blink of an eye. The man in the black suit immediately began to look around himself, but Jia could not be found anywhere. Yana. It turned out that the guy, using his abilities, managed to quickly climb to the very top of a high mountain made up of boxes, which greatly surprised the men. Looking into one of Jia's boxes, he saw that the things there were not his, so he asked if all the goods stored on this slope really belonged only to the boss of the men. The leader of these men did not understand what the mysterious guy was getting at and what he intended to do with this product. Xia Yan, preparing to use his ability, replied that he should use the enemy's knowledge against him, so he studied men and robbed them right now. The next moment, the protagonist used his ability and transported all the goods to the other world, which was clearly visible from afar. The next day, the owner of this product, who lived in a large mansion, received unpleasant news. The woman was unhappy that her subordinates failed not only to return the medicine, but also to allow all the other goods to be stolen. The man with a scar on his face timidly made excuses and said that the person who stole the goods had some kind of superpower. He recalled that there were a lot of things in the warehouse, but after the main character threw them out into the street and closed the doors, everything immediately disappeared. Only some time later, the men managed to open the door, but the warehouse was already completely empty. The woman heard this and was very surprised, but soon asked the name of the man who dared to rob them. One of the men immediately responded that he had already checked the recipient's information, which was indicated in the documents, and found out that this guy's name was Xia Yan. The woman thought that this guy had abilities similar to a spatial warehouse, so he should be captured at the first opportunity. The woman was distracted from these thoughts by her subordinate, who suddenly began to feel very ill and could hardly stand on his feet. Suddenly the man fell to the floor and began to breathe heavily. His appearance indicated that he had already completely turned into a zombie. The woman, seeing what happened to her subordinate, said that the virus had already managed to penetrate the brain, and even if the man now took the Shang-Qing pill, it would still be useless. That's why the second man should have thrown him out into the street and burned him, but under no circumstances should he grab the zombie or come into contact with his blood. Just at that moment, the zombie began to come to his senses and rise to his feet. The next moment, the infected man suddenly rushed towards the woman in order to harm her. Despite this, she kept her cool and quickly reacted, quickly using her ability, which surprisingly she had. At the same moment, the large windows behind the woman swung open from a strong gust of wind. After this, elastic tree branches entered the room and mercilessly pierced the zombie, preventing it from accomplishing its intended goal. The branches penetrated deep into the body of the dead man, who could still feel pain. Then the tree branches began to return back to the street, not forgetting to take the bloodthirsty zombie with them. Already on the street, the body of the infected man was torn to pieces, thanks to which the evil spirits no longer posed a danger to anyone. The man, who was watching what was happening from the side, was shocked and could not utter a word. At the same time, the woman remained calm and warned that this was only the beginning. Therefore, she ordered to continue searching for medicines and stocking up on weapons. She also believed that they should start strengthening the port warehouse, since one side of it was located to the coast. Finally, the woman ordered that all the workers be gathered and mentally prepared for the fact that the end of the world was coming. Meanwhile, Xiaoyan, while at home, handed his sister a pack of Shang-Qing pills and asked her to eat them. The guy said that the water and air were no longer clean, and therefore only mineral water had to be used for skin contact and drinking, and also to take pills to protect the body. Xia Yun was willing to follow all these rules, but she was curious about what was going on, and so she asked her brother to tell her everything, to find out about everything. But first he suggested that she take a walk to one place. Soon, our heroes were already walking along the dark corridor, heading towards the exit of Xia Yun. She said that this was the first time she left the house after returning from school, but she still had a bad feeling. Xia Yan. I assumed it was because bad people were starting to show their true colors. Suddenly, someone's voice was heard from behind the door of one of the apartments, saying that he was hungry and all the food was gone. Aunt Zhang, who was finishing off the remains of her grandson, was indignant that her neighbors owned everything and did not give her anything. She really wanted to get everything because she deserved it. Suddenly, a loud sound was heard somewhere above, which made the woman very angry, because she had already asked her neighbors more than once not to make noise because it prevented her from sleeping peacefully. Aunt Zhang, absorbed by the sinister energy, thought that people were specifically bothering her, so she ran out of the apartment in a rage to teach the noisy neighbors a lesson. Soon loud noise and human screams began to be heard from the house, which clearly indicated that the woman had managed to teach her neighbors a lesson. At this time, Xia Yan and Xia Yun was already getting into a taxi in order to get to the right place and take a walk there. Our heroes did not notice that guests had come to visit them. Ruolan's mother looked around and asked her daughter if the residential complex was safe. The girl replied that even if it was unsafe here, then Xia Yan was a very strong man, and henceforth her home would always be next to him. The woman believed that they had not wasted a lot of money on a first-class plastic surgery, because now her daughter was very beautiful and would definitely be able to get the main character. Ruolan thought so too, because she was sure that Xia Yan liked her appearance. Otherwise, he would not have been so kind to her before and would not have stopped courting her. The girl was sure that the main character would bow before her again, and then they would even be able to call upon rain and wind, because the guy managed to rob even the Song family. Ruolan continued to say that if she appeared in front of Jia Nao Yanem, then he will surely become her obedient peach. At this moment, the girl's mother noticed that the guy was leaving somewhere in a taxi. In order not to miss her chance, Ruolan asked her mother to quickly get into the car and follow the main character, because now he was a tasty morsel for them. Ruolan couldn't let other girls take this guy away from her. Soon our heroes arrived at the fake City Zoo. This is where Jia wanted to take a walk today, Yan with her younger sister. Suddenly, they heard one of the visitors expressing indignation that the animal had attacked his son. The zoo worker asked for forgiveness and said that this usually did not happen here. Xia Yun, hearing about the aggressive animals, assumed that it was somehow connected with the end of the world. Her brother explained a lot to her during the trip, so the girl began to understand what was happening. The girl clarified that during the previous end of the world, people turned into zombies or mutated and acquired abilities, but her brother was lucky enough to awaken her before the apocalypse, so he knew everything. Jia Yan confirmed all this, although he understood that he did not tell the whole truth, because he did not want his sister to find out about his painful experience from his past life and begin to feel even sadder. The girl then suggested that they should hide in order to survive the end of the world. Xia Yan replied that this would only help them for a while, and in order to truly survive, they had to gain strength. The main character continued to say that he, of course, became much stronger than before, but still could not always be near his sister to protect her. The guy believed that anything could happen from the moment the end of the world came, so Xia Yun had to become as strong as him. Xia Yun, hearing her older brother's statement, was surprised and said that she would really like to become stronger so as not to be a burden, but she doubted whether she would succeed. This is precisely why the main character wanted to take his sister to the turtle zone without explaining anything to her yet. Meanwhile, Ruolan and her mother had also already arrived at the zoo. The girl did not understand why Xia Yan came here, but her mother thought that this was a great opportunity for their chance meeting. Unexpectedly, Ruolan stopped near the enclosure with llamas because she needed to put on lipstick before meeting the main character. The girl was completely unaware of the ominous look the animals were giving her. They were clearly already affected by the approaching end of the world. At the same time, our heroes were already passing by a lake in which small turtles were swimming. Just at this moment, Sudaji informed the warden that she could already smell the strange creatures, which became stronger with every step. The demon bear also decided to share his thoughts and said that he always didn't like fighting with such creatures because they were stubborn and lived much longer than him. After some time wandering around this large territory of Xiaoyan thought with joy that he had finally found what he was looking for here. The boy and his younger sister headed towards a large turtle, which was sitting quietly on a rock and basking in the rays of the bright sun. Sudaji and the demon bear were shocked to see the 1,000-year-old turtle. At the same time, the protagonist thought that she had lived here since the construction of this zoo, which meant more than 100 years. Xiaoyan felt a little awkward when he saw the name of this turtle on the sign. Her name was Tiny. The guy remembered that this turtle was very famous in a past life because 3 descended gods were going to seize its habitat, but the old turtle refused to leave its home and bit the gods. The gods tried to resist and fought with her for several days, but they were unable to break through her strong shell, so the guy regretted that he had not entrusted his sister's life to her then. Xiaoyan walked closer to the big turtle and bowed respectfully, turning to it with the intention of talking. As expected, the turtle said absolutely nothing to the man and did not even turn its head in his direction. The main character immediately realized that the turtle was just pretending not to understand human speech, and therefore decided to resort to radical methods in order to make it talk. Demonstrating his strength to her, he began to say that he was hungry after the walk, and now he would like to drink some turtle soup. She understood everything perfectly. After this, the turtle immediately spoke and said that the man was very impatient. She then said that since ancient times, elders were respectfully bowed to, so she was interested in why the main character did not observe decency and immediately moved on to threats. Xia Yan. He replied that the end of the world was approaching, and they did not have time for all the formalities. Then he said his name and introduced his younger sister, who was surprised that Kroha was actually talking. The turtle felt awkward about this name, so she immediately began to justify herself by saying that she had received it from the zoo director by accident. The little one continued mysteriously saying that hundreds of years had passed since then, but compared to the 3 millennia lived, this moment was like a snap of the fingers. Sudaji and the black bear were shocked to hear this, and immediately told the warden that if he could eat the spirit of this turtle, he would extend his life for hundreds of years. Then the main character turned to the turtle and said that he came here to ask her to protect Jia. Yun, however, the guy was ready to fulfill any condition for this. To this, the turtle mysteriously said that all living beings were alarmed after the appearance of the blood moon, and after the end of the world, her turtle clan would certainly suffer. Xiaoyan suggested that if Kroha was talking about turtles swimming in the pond, then he could move them to the demon pacification tower and dig a pool for them there. The big turtle was very surprised when she heard from the main character about the Tower of Humility of Demons. Xiaoyan did not spend much time explaining anything, but instead showed the turtle that very tower and his ability to control it. The unexpected turtle turned its attention to one of the prisoners, who was on the very top floor of the prison. She immediately remembered the words of this sinful god, that this was the only opportunity for Xuanwu to ascend to the stage where the furious thunder rumbled. After this, the turtle suddenly declared that it was now clear to her what the cause and effect of her appearance here hundreds of years ago was. Then she turned to the main character and asked if he could properly manage this prison, because even though the end of the world inspired fear, if the guy goes down the wrong path, it will become tens of times more dangerous. The turtle also asked whether it was worth helping Jia at all, Yan if he cannot physically withstand the weight of her 3,000 years of life. Without waiting for an answer, Kroha began to fall at great speed straight towards the main character in order to test his strength. Xiaoyan raised his hands up and concentrated all his energy in his legs, preparing to hold the huge turtle. The next moment, a deafening roar echoed throughout the area as the huge turtle fell to the ground. Ruolan heard this rumble, which made her a little worried, so she wanted to leave here already. Suddenly, someone tore the wig off the girl's head, making it clear that the consequences of the collision with Xia last time Yanem was still reflected in Ruolan's appearance. Turning back, the angry girl saw that her boyfriend had been taken away by the llama. Ruolan was very angry at the animal and was already planning to teach it a lesson for ruining her wig. The alpaca quickly calmed the grumpy girl down by literally spitting right in her face. The next moment, several aggressive alpacas began to attack Ruolan in order to teach her a lesson for her inappropriate behavior. The girl and her mother could do nothing about it and only tried to cover themselves with their hands so that it would not harm their eyes. Ruolan was very angry at the animals and was about to take revenge on them, but the girl's mother asked her daughter to leave the alpacas alone because now they needed to find Jia. Yana. Somehow the woman managed to put the wig back on Joe's head. Lan. But this did little to help the girl's appearance. Noise came from, which meant that the main character was probably somewhere there. Ruolan and her mother walked further and further into the turtle's habitat, but could not find Jia. Yana, therefore, decided to go even further despite the stench that was all around. The girl's mother was in such a hurry that she didn't even notice how she stepped on the turtle's eggs, breaking several of them in the process. The woman did not regret what she had done at all, and was only indignant that the vile substance had stained her shoes. Without thinking twice, she began to wipe her shoes on the turtle's shell, while saying that this was the only thing animals were good for. After this, The mother and daughter continued their journey deeper into the forest, completely unaware that the turtle's behavior was already very different from their norm. Ruolan said with great joy that they only needed to go around a large tree, and behind those leaves they would definitely see Xia, Yana. The girl believed that the main character would definitely be touched by the fact that she, Fragile, made her way through the thickets of trees because of her deep feelings of love for him. Roland quickly made her way through the dense thickets, not even suspecting what awaited her ahead. Walking a little further forward, the girl was dumbfounded with fear because she saw in front of her a huge turtle, which was looking at her with clearly unkind eyes. The next moment, the turtle bit Roland's hand. The turtle's teeth were usually sharp and small, and their bite was very powerful, so it was incredibly difficult to break free from their grip. The turtle grabbed tightly onto Roland's hand, and she lost her balance in surprise and fell to the ground. The girl tried not to scream because she thought that otherwise Xiaoyan noticed how ugly she was. At the same time, her mother couldn't hold back her scream when someone bit her leg. It turned out that the woman was attacked by several turtles at once, who had no intention of taking pity on her. The mother and daughter, having become victims of aggressive turtles, no longer thought about anything other than their salvation and the incredible pain that the bites of these animals brought them. Ruolan tried to run away, calling Xia along the way. Yana came to the rescue, but it was very difficult to run along the sandy coast in high-heeled shoes. As a result, the girl was unable to keep her balance and fell into the water, which seemed very unusual and disgusting to her. Meanwhile, the main character continued his confrontation with the huge turtle, which intended to crush him with its shell. The black bear turned to the guy and asked him to call him for help, and then they would be able to defeat this turtle and then eat its meat. Xiaoyan refused this help. The main character continued to resist, making incredible efforts to do so. His entire body had already begun to tremble from exhaustion. Gradually, the enormous weight of the turtle forced Xiaoyan sank lower and lower, and now he was already standing on one knee, leaning against the ground. The turtle asked the guys to stop resisting because all creatures were meant to live and die. Also, the baby believed that the main character would not be able to do anything until the end of the world. The turtle continued saying that the guy should have entrusted the Tower of Pacification to her, because then she would take care of protecting the main character and his loved ones, and then the destruction of the world would not affect them. Xiaoyan did not listen to his opponent's speech at all, and tried to concentrate as hard as possible on the problem at hand, but he was greatly hampered by the Sanskrit that was swirling around his head. The turtle then went on to say that such an evil thing as the Demon Suppression Tower was not something the protagonist could be held responsible for. The Sanskrit that enveloped the guy from all sides, and therefore the prison of demons, seemed to suck out the life force, which is why Sudaji and the black bear felt very unwell. Xia's seemingly hopeless situation, Yan did not give up and took the turtle's words as an outright lie. Suddenly, energy began to fill the body of the main character, who at the same time asked the old turtle, who had already lived for so long, whether she had heard about one truth. Xiaoyan, without wanting to, made incredible efforts because he believed that the truth was that he who did not move forward was moving backwards. The next moment, the protagonist managed to stand up and straighten his back despite the enormous mass of the turtle that was pressing down on him from above. However, the confrontation is not over yet. Now Xiaoyan needed absolutely all his strength to take the final step that separated him from victory. The main character threw the huge turtle to the side, which surprised her very much because she didn't expect to see such strength in a person. The baby was shocked by what happened and did not understand how Xiaoyan managed to free himself from the influence of her Sanskrit. Meanwhile, the guy had already taken out a rope that was capable of tying up immortals and tried to make the turtle stop resisting him. After this, the main character threw a rope around the turtle's neck, after which it could no longer resist even if it tried. The black bear urged the boy to kill the turtle right now. Sudaji agreed because of her, the warden almost went astray. But fortunately, he had a strong will that distinguished him from others. Finally, Xiaoyan set a condition for the old turtle. She could either obey him or die right now. The little one understood her hopeless situation, so she chose the second option. Having received no response from the giant turtle, Xiaoyan decided with great pleasure that he should continue making his arguments. Having once again received a strong blow to the head, Kroha began to beg the main character not to hit him. Said with displeasure that he had simply used the Taishan technique to stimulate the restructuring of the guy's bones, but he had simply thrown him away. After this, Kroha turned to Xiaoyan and asked her to stop her brother because he was cruel to animals. Meanwhile, Jiayan thought about what the turtle had said and admitted that thanks to the restructuring of his bones, his abilities had indeed improved and his strength seemed to have increased. The protagonist was interrupted from these thoughts by his younger sister, who really felt sorry for the turtle. Xia Yun asked the guy to let Grandpa Turtle go because she thought he wasn't that bad. Xia's hand, Yana, his anger began to subside immediately. The huge turtle immediately noticed this and was surprised that although the main character was torn apart by anger from within, he could control it without difficulty. Then the animal quickly decreased in size, asking Xia along the way. Yun simply called him tiny because any other address would have made him older. The turtle also said that she had the ability to recognize bad intentions, so the girl could no longer worry about her safety. Xia Yun was very happy to hear this, so she sincerely thanked Tiny, telling him her name along the way. Meanwhile, Xia Yan stood silently to the side, and the black demon bear Pod Guanyin regretted that they would not be able to eat turtle soup. After this, the main character decided that he had to play it safe anyway, because he couldn't be calm about leaving his sister with an uncontrollable monster. Xia Yan turned to Crowha with a serious expression and asked if he knew what he had to do. The turtle confidently replied that she knew and understood everything. She also justified herself for everything she had said to the guy before. The little one knew that the demon tower was an ancient and sinister place, and therefore only a person with great luck could control it. Then the animal, without objection, began to penetrate as a sign of pardon in order to get into the Tower of Demons. Soon, Crowha found himself in prison and said that his spirit would be imprisoned in this cage, so he was at the complete disposal of the main character. Xia Yan wasted no time in saying that the turtle's true body would accompany Xia Yun, but if something goes wrong, Wan Lei will eat his soul. After this, the main character was absolutely sure that his little sister would be safe. Suddenly, loud sounds were heard from the depths of the forest, which greatly alarmed our heroes. In addition, thick clouds of dust rose up around, as if a powerful explosion had occurred somewhere nearby. Without wasting time, the main character climbed a tall tree in order to look around and understand what had happened. What he saw really surprised the guy, Xia Yan. I saw a herd of various aggressive animals running through the forest. Their eyes were brightly glowing, indicating that they were all already infected. The guy watching all this thought that it was rare to meet such a variety of animals, so he needed to take those who had not yet mutated to the tower. After this, the main character quickly climbed down from the tree and headed towards a pond in which small turtles were swimming. In order to save these animals from being infected by Xiaoyan wasted no time in using his abilities and transporting them to the other world. The baby was very grateful to Xiaoyanu for not letting those turtles die. After this, the main character had to safely leave the zoo and take his little sister to a safe place. Taking the girl Jia tightly, Yan began to quickly and deftly jump from one tree to another in order to avoid encountering aggressive animals. Suddenly, the main character heard someone's voice behind him, loudly addressing him. Stopping and turning back, the guy was very surprised when he saw Ruolan and her mother. Ruolan continued to call Xiaoyana and say that she was his favorite girl. The surprised protagonist immediately asked what the girl and her mother were doing here. Despite the question asked, Ruolan continued to say that she was ready to make peace with the guy because she knew how much he loved her. She also assured with a crazy expression that she would forgive Jia Yana for his rudeness to her last time, and therefore he should have been very sorry for this. Xiaoyan had no intention of helping Ruolan, so he quickly left despite the girl's pleas to return to her and continue their relationship. Ruolan didn't understand why the main character suddenly treated her like that, because in her opinion, she was very beautiful and loudly declared it. Suddenly, the scoundrel heard the growling of aggressive animals behind her, which frightened her greatly. Without wasting time, the predators rushed at their victims. The frightened Ruolan tried to drive them away with loud screams, but all was in vain. After this, the sounds of destruction began to echo throughout the forest. They were caused by mutated animals that destroyed everything that came their way. Meanwhile, the main character continued to look for a safe place for his sister, while simultaneously transferring healthy animals to his other world. Xiaoyan was pleased that he had managed to collect a wide variety of animal species, but now he had to focus more on finding a place to spend the night. Soon the guy came across the administrative building of the zoo administration, and having looked at it more closely, he realized that everyone who was inside had already fled long ago. Next, Xiaoyan thought that for now, Xiaoyun could have stayed here because the zoo was located in a remote suburb, and there was no one here except predatory animals. The girl agreed that it was a good place, so assuming that her brother still had unfinished business, she began to assure him that she could take care of herself here. Xia Yan asked if his sister wasn't afraid to stay here alone. Xia Yun. She reminded her that Kroha was with her and that she also needed to become stronger. The girl also said that she had already made an agreement with the turtle and it would teach her how to practice her abilities. Xia Yun promised that she would not be a burden to her brother and would help him with all her might. The main character was glad to hear this and praises the girl for her determination. After this, the main character respectfully turned to Kroha in order to ask him to do something. The turtle happily said that the guy shouldn't have behaved so politely, after which she assured him that she already knew very well what she had to do. Without saying another word, Kroha suddenly used his abilities, causing his eyes to emit a bright light. At that very moment, a mysterious barrier began to appear around the administrative building, which served as protection for those inside. Soon everything was ready, and now the main character could not worry about the safety of his younger sister. No matter how hard they tried, aggressive animals could not get behind the barrier, which proved its effectiveness. Xia Yan, seeing this result, breathed a sigh of relief, believing that, at least temporarily, one problem had been solved. After that, the guy, without wasting any time, went to Xia's business. Yun asked her brother to be careful and promised to wait for him here. Soon after, Xia Yan had already run outside the zoo and quickly headed to the city, wanting to finish all her business as quickly as possible. Along the way, the guy saw that chaos had already engulfed human civilization. There were abandoned cars on the roads, many of which had been damaged by collisions with each other. Despite all this, there were no people visible around, and all these cars seemed to have appeared here out of nowhere. The reason for this was the zombies, who had driven over the remains of their victims and were nervously looking around in search of people. Despite all this, the main character was not at all frightened or surprised, because there was something that attracted his attention more. The guy looked at the sky and saw how it was all covered with black thunderclouds and the huge moon turned blood red. What he saw made Xiayana understand that time was running out, so he had to hurry in order to do what he had planned. After some time, the large metropolis was completely plunged into chaos. Loud explosions were heard everywhere, which caused large fires. People desperately tried to escape from the zombies chasing them, but unfortunately not everyone succeeded in doing so. The monsters did not feel tired and knew no mercy, so the city's numbers were rapidly declining. The breaking news reported that there had been numerous traffic accidents in the city center, and hospitals were already overflowing with people suffering from food poisoning, bruised skin, red eyes, and high temperatures. Bai Shiyin only woke up and learned from the news that due to the abnormal weather, a storm was approaching the city, so the population was advised to stock up on everything they needed and not leave their homes. The girl, having heard all this, was very surprised and did not understand what the reason for all this was and what was happening in the city in general. It seemed to her that all this was like the end of the world, and in order to find out more about what happened, she decided to look for answers on the internet. Saw shocked Bai Shiyin, causing her eyes to widen for a moment. Users posted videos of zombies attacking people online. Some didn't believe it was real and thought it was good cosplay. In addition, one of the users who was interested in astronomy and loved to photograph the moon managed to photograph the monster. According to these words, with each passing hour, this monster was getting closer and closer. Bai Shiyin, having learned what was happening right now in the city, I began to get very worried and feel a little sick. Then the girl noticed her hands, which for some reason were covered in bruises. The dizziness that suddenly overcame the girl only confirmed that she had caught a cold. Without wasting any time, Bai Shiyin decided to take the medicine that was lying nearby on the table. Fortunately, there were quite a lot of medicines, so the girl did not have to worry about her health. She immediately remembered Xia Yana, who advised taking them more often. The girl hoped that this would help her. Suddenly, Bai Shiyin felt a strong pain which indicated that her illness was rapidly progressing. Then the girl's eyes began to darken, which is why she began to try with all her might not to lose consciousness. Realizing how serious her situation was, the girl took a whole handful of pills in her hand and quickly ate them, in the hope that it would help her. After that, the exhausted Bai Shiyin lost consciousness. It was unclear what condition she was in and whether the medicine helped her. Meanwhile, the main character stood on the roof of one of the multi-story buildings and thoughtfully watched the chaos that reigned below. Looking at the time, the guy remembered that in his past life, exactly at midnight, a powerful god descended on the Emerald City, and before that, starting at 6 o'clock in the evening, small gods constantly appeared. The main character also remembered that the first deity to appear was in the Imperial building. His landing caused enormous destruction and general panic. Xia Yan decided to calmly wait for him here, already anticipating that when he kills this deity, he will be able to receive a lot of spiritual strength and become stronger. In order not to waste time, the main character decided to prepare for the upcoming battle, and therefore began to meditate. Thanks to his diligent concentration, the guy managed to create a lotus flower inside himself, which absorbed a large amount of energy. Besides this, Xiaoyan began to absorb the previously unfamiliar energy that was right around him. Very soon, the main character achieved an unexpected result, which surprised him greatly. The boy realized with delight that his abilities had reached the 3rd level of peak, and in addition, his red lotus had a new mutation that needed to be tested. He didn't expect at all that thanks to the imprisonment of the turtle, the abnormal power directly reached the peak of the 3rd level, due to which he was able to greatly increase his spiritual power. Now the main character was absolutely ready to face any danger and was confident that he could overcome it. The boy looked fearlessly at the blood-red moon, which seemed to be getting closer to the earth with each passing hour and bringing with it destruction and chaos. Suddenly, Xiaoyan, I heard someone start to break down the door that led to the roof. The guy immediately prepared for the worst. Soon the door opened and several men entered the roof, who were very unhappy that the main character had somehow gotten onto the roof of the Imperial building. One of the men turned to the manager with bewilderment and asked how the guy was able to climb onto the roof, since the corridor elevators had long been closed. The manager took his subordinate's words solely as an excuse, and therefore threatened that all his salary would be delayed this month. The man had no choice but to accept the punishment and apologize, even though he was not at fault in this whole situation. Meanwhile, the manager remained dissatisfied and believed that inferior people were only worthy of doing such work. Xiaoyan was completely oblivious to the approach of the people who intended to drive him off the roof of this building, because his attention was completely focused on the one he was waiting for here. Looking at the sky, everyone saw an unusual phenomenon, which looked very ominous even despite what had been happening in the city recently. Out of nowhere, lightning began to flash in the blood-red clouds, which did not bode well. Everything that was happening was very frightening for the men, who were completely unprepared for something like this. The manager, although he remained calm, could not believe his eyes when he saw all this. Soon, everyone present witnessed how the hands of an ominous creature began to emerge from a huge crack in the sky, as if trying to break out. The next moment, everyone was deafened by the loud cry of the monster, who finally showed himself to people. After this, a huge monster with several pairs of hooves instead of ankles began to descend from the rift onto the roof of the Imperial building. He managed to do this with ease, which only added to the fear of those who saw it all. This monster was a bull demon who was just a soldier, but he posed a huge danger to people. The manager was amazed by the appearance of this monster, which made him unable to stand on his feet, while calling him a demon. The frightened manager turned to his subordinates with displeasure and ordered them to quickly protect him from the demon. They just stand there. In order to motivate his employees, the man threatened to fire them, after which he quickly changed his mind and promised to raise their salaries. Unfortunately for the manager, it was already too late. The demon bull cut the man down with one blow right in front of his subordinates. All who witnessed this were dumbfounded with fear, and for some time could not move. The trembling bodies simply did not obey them. Soon the men finally came to their senses and realized that they needed to get away from here as quickly as possible before the demon finished them off too. Unfortunately, the ferocious monster had already chosen its next target and therefore had no intention of letting anyone go. The next moment, the bull demon rushed forward with lightning speed, cutting several people into pieces along the way. In addition to its weapons, the monster also used its hooves, with which it literally trampled people trying to escape from it. Demona was very happy with this pastime, so he laughed loudly and, calling people insects, threatened to crush them all. Despite the danger looming around from the ferocious monster, Xiaoyan remained standing calmly in place and looked at his opponent fearlessly. The demon bull didn't intend to waste time fighting the main character, so he decided to simply crush him with his hoof like the rest of the people. The next moment, the monster, with all his fury, stamped his foot right on the spot where the guy was standing. This caused a loud explosion, which was an indicator of the demon's strength. It seemed that the battle was over, but suddenly the monster felt something strange under his hoof. It turned out that the main character was able to easily stop the attack of his opponent Xia. Yan calmly asked if the monster really hoped to crush him with such force. After that, the guy, without wasting any time, created a fiery sword from the energy, which he needed for a counterattack. Then the main character, smiling, suggested that the monster use him for his training. The bull demon was very surprised when he realized that the guy somehow understood his speech, which is why he stopped fighting for a while. At the same time, the main character remained calm and focused, as if he was preparing for something. Suddenly, Xiaoyan jumped up from his seat and pushing hard off the roof of the Imperial building jumped high into the air. The monster could only watch as his opponent easily repelled his attack and prepared to continue this battle. Soon Xiaoyan landed in a safe place and began to watch what actions the bull demon would take. People who watched what was happening could not believe that the main character was really a man, and I really hope that he will be able to kill this monster. Meanwhile, the fierce monster said that he did not expect to meet a worthy opponent and was very glad that there was such entertainment for him in this world. After this, the demon decided to demonstrate all his rage to the main character and therefore roared loudly and prepared for battle. Swinging his iron axe, the monster said that he wanted to get a good beating from how he would kill Xiaoyan. The next moment, the demon struck the place where the guy stood, simultaneously demanding that he be grateful for the fact that he was lucky enough to fight him. Surprisingly, the main character was not hurt at all and was able to deftly jump onto his enemy's huge iron axe. The demon bull was shocked that his attack was so ineffective. Besides, he didn't know what to expect from this unusual person. Xiaoyan smiled broadly and said that he would cut off one of the monster's legs because there were too many of them. After that, the main character rushed forward, and I assumed that it would have been better for him to cut off one of the demon's hands. The demon bull did not agree with this at all, so he intended to literally devour the guy right now, and therefore had already prepared his sharp teeth for this. The monster tried to realize his plan, but the main character turned out to be very agile and fast, so he was able to remain unharmed. Next, Xiaoyan jumped high into the air once more to complete his plan. At this time, the monster did not take its furious gaze off him. The demon bull did not expect that his opponent seemed so strong, causing him to instantly become overcome with anger. He felt that he was losing control over the situation all the time, so from despair he became more and more angry, and his eyes were literally burning in flames. Meanwhile, the main character had already swung his sword and was quickly flying towards his opponent in order to carry out his plan. People watched what was happening carefully until the very end, not losing hope that the guy would be able to defeat this demon right now. The next moment, Xiaoyan flashed through his enemy, as if planning to cut off his arm with one blow. The bull demon was shocked by what happened, and looking at the splashes of his own blood, asked how the guy dared to do this to him. In response to this, Xiaoyan advised his opponent to relax, because he still had 5 legs and 1 arm. At the same time, the guy had already turned his sword into a spear, stated with complete confidence that the monster would not be able to die quickly until he was completely satisfied. The bull demon was very unhappy with the threats that came from the mouth of the main character and did not understand what to expect from him. Meanwhile, the guy had already attacked his opponent, not giving him time to recover. The spear pierced deep into the monster's flesh, causing a stream of blue blood to immediately gush out. Xiaoyan had no intention of stopping there, so he quickly changed his position to deal a few more blows, while the demon himself was taken aback by what was happening. The demon bull was very sorry that he could not resist the main character, although he was really looking forward to the day when he would finally be allowed to fight with people. As a result, the bloodthirsty monster was cut into pieces so he could only think about why he was so weak. Meanwhile, the guy was happy about his victory and said that his opponent was much weaker than he expected. Despite this, Xiaoyan remembers well that this was only the first demon. Then the guy calmly turned to the bull demon, who despite his condition was still alive, and said that he would become weaker and weaker. This is why the protagonist asked the monster to give him his spiritual power instead of continuing to endure senseless suffering. Demona already wanted to object and say that no matter what he would fight to the end, but at that moment he saw a tower of demons behind his opponent, which surprised him greatly. The demon bull saw the other monsters that were imprisoned in this prison looking at him with a sly smile on their faces. Because of this, the demon could no longer say a word. Suddenly, the monster began to experience strange sensations that were caused by the demon tower. Suddenly, the monster literally burst apart from the inside, which the main character did not expect at all. After that, the demon's spiritual power headed to the top floor of the tower. Jia watched this closely. Yana, who did not understand at all what was happening. Soon the guy realized that despite his attempts to finally defeat the demon, he did not want to give in. But as soon as he looked at the tower, he immediately fell into horror. As a result of this battle, the spiritual power of the main character increased by 5%, and in addition, he became more experienced in using fire, which could not but please him. Then the guy assumed that it was already about 7 o'clock in the evening, which meant he needed to think about the approach of other demons. Unfortunately, he only remembered the approximate location of the necessary places. Xiaoyan decided that it was time for him to leave. However, the men who witnessed what was happening began to thank him for saving them and asked what all of this was about. The guy briefly replied that the end of the world had come and advised the men to take care of themselves. Suddenly, one of them, calling the main character a great god, asked to take them with him. Xiaoyan didn't respond to this and fearlessly jumped off the roof of a multi-story building, causing the men to worry about him. The people were left alone among the remains of the demon bull and did not understand what they were supposed to do next. Suddenly, everyone noticed how their colleague was desperately trying to take the demon's huge axe into his hands, but he couldn't do it. Soon this guy started laughing loudly and saying that this weapon was a real treasure because it was used by a monster. Along with this, the man was enveloped in a bequeathing aura. In the end, the maddened guy, who was bursting into loud laughter, still managed to lift the handle of the demonic weapon. Meanwhile, everyone present noticed that the remains of the monster's body had for some reason turned into a blue liquid. They were also very concerned about the condition of their colleague. People were wary of the unknown liquid, so they tried to prevent it from getting on their shoes and clothes, but maintaining absolute cleanliness was very difficult. In the end, one of the men decided that everyone needed to wash first in order to protect themselves. Meanwhile, the guy who was trying to pick up the demon's weapon was increasingly falling under the influence of the sinister aura, from which he quickly lost the rest of his consciousness. Finally, the maddened guy turned his gaze to his colleagues, whom he now considered exclusively his food. Seeing this, the men were very scared and did not understand what to do. The suddenly maddened guy nevertheless attacked his colleagues, growling loudly like a wild animal. After this, loud human screams began to echo throughout the area, which were supposed to instill fear. Unfortunately, no one paid attention to this because the entire city was already filled with similar screams and loud growls of numerous zombies. Song family's villa was more or less calm, as if the end of the world had not affected its inhabitants at all. Suddenly, the head of the family, who was in an underground hangar, was approached by his worried subordinate and informed that another person had fallen ill. Sun Tian, studying the ancient relics, calmly ordered his subordinate to send the sick man to the isolation ward and not bother him with trifles anymore. The guy, although he had received the order, finally hurried to carry it out because he had to report who exactly had fallen ill. Song family immediately realized that they were talking about his son, which made him seriously worried. Without wasting time, the man and his subordinate ran to the isolation ward, where many infected people had already been placed. They all loudly begged for help, but Sun Tian didn't pay any attention to them. Finally running up to the right cell, the man looked inside and asked his son if everything was okay with him. Sun Shijun, who had not yet recovered from the skirmish with the main character, was now feeling very bad, and with all his might asked his father to help him. Without wasting any time, the worried Sun Tian turned to his subordinate and asked where the medicines were that would cure this disease. He was very unhappy that they had not yet been found. The guy said that only one person took 2 Shangqin tablets, thanks to which he only reduced the fever but was not completely cured. Despite this, the man ordered that this medicine be brought as soon as possible. Soon Sun Tian, without entering the isolation ward, threw the necessary medications to his son and asked him to take them quickly. Sun Shijun, not wanting to turn into a zombie, crawled across the floor with all his might to get the drug. With a trembling hand, the guy took a whole handful of pills and ate them in the hope that this would help him to recover. Sun Tian silently watched his son's condition, not losing hope that he would get better. Soon the guy breathed a sigh of relief, and although he was still exhausted, he briefly said that he felt better. Sun Tian was very happy about this, so he ordered his subordinate to find more of these pills. The guy replied that the Song family only had 3 boxes of this medicine. The man was very angry because he had long ago ordered to stock up on these medicines. The frightened subordinate explained that they had stocked up on cheaper and more effective medicine for fever. Hearing this, Sun Tian ordered to get this medicine at any cost, even if it was necessary to use weapons. The guy replied that there were no more of them, because they were all bought by a man named Xia Yan. Hearing this name, Sun Tian was consumed with rage because he realized that the main character had deliberately taken a lot of money from him in order to buy up all of Shangqin's pills in advance. Then the subordinate said that there was too much disorder on the street now, so they could not use the underground tunnels. He asked the head of the family what they should do now. Sun Tian began to regretfully reflect on the fact that his family was certainly doomed, because in addition to a large supply of necessary medicines, Xia Yan also had unusual abilities. The next moment, a loud explosion sounded, which easily knocked down the iron door of the isolation cell. Sun Tian looked away in surprise, not understanding what could have caused this explosion. Soon the man saw his son, who was feeling well and looked quite healthy, but he was shrouded in a mysterious aura. Sun Shijun happily reported that she was fine, and the unpleasant sensation seemed to have left his body. Despite this, the guy still behaved strangely. He also stated that he was now very strong, and in order to demonstrate this, the guy suddenly punched a concrete wall, causing it to collapse. Sun Tian was amazed by what he saw and already began to happily assume that his son had acquired abilities. Sun Shijun continued to loudly proclaim that everything was fine with him and that he now had superpowers, which felt very pleasant. The man could not believe that cold pills really had such an effect and assumed that if you take them on time, you could gain superpowers. Sun Tian thought that this was all too good to be true, so he ordered that these drugs be given to other infected people and that their condition be carefully monitored. Also, the man with a sly smile on his face ordered after the completion of the experiment to go outside and go to the warehouse where Jia Yan kept his stock of medicines. The villain assumed that as soon as he took control of the lives and deaths of gifted people with superpowers, he would certainly become a real king. Soon after, a quiet morning arrived. It seemed as if the end of the world had never happened. Bai Xiyin had already woken up, but she was still lying on the sofa and thinking about her condition. The girl did not expect at all that a regular cold medicine would actually be so effective. Almost all the symptoms of her illness had already disappeared. Suddenly, she felt a strange feeling, and her hand, in which she held the pills, began to emit light, which surprised the girl very much. Bai Xiyin immediately began to rub her eyes, not believing that all of this was actually happening. Then she looked at her hand again, but now everything was as usual. She didn't understand whether she had simply made a mistake or whether everything was happening for real. Xiyin was interrupted from these thoughts by an unexpected loud knock on the door, which quickly attracted her attention and put her on guard. After that, the girl heard a familiar voice behind the door asking Bai Xiyin for help. Without thinking twice, I ran to the door to find out what was going on. Seeing her friend, a girl named Xing said in an alarmed voice that almost all the residents in their house had turned into zombies and were now killing everyone. She also said that people who suffered from zombies were also turned into zombies, which is why she could not get into her home and begged her friend for help. Bai Xiyin was very surprised by everything she heard, but without thinking twice, she decided to let the girl into the apartment. But the chain on the front door got stuck. Bai Xiyin tried to solve this problem as quickly as possible without understanding what could have happened to this chain. Meanwhile, Xing heard the loud roar of zombies approaching from the stairwell, which made her very scared. The girl begged her friend to hurry up and open the door faster. Bai Xiyin was shocked when she looked out onto the stairwell. The girl saw a crowd of bloodthirsty zombies slowly climbing the stairs to catch up with their victim. Xing continued to beg for help. The zombies were getting closer and closer, but the woman they met, Bai Xiyin, still couldn't open the door, so she asked her friend to wait a little. Xing was once again left behind a closed door, and watching the ruthless monsters approaching her, she only hoped that her friend would manage to save her. Finally, Bai Xiyin managed to open the door, so she wasted no time in telling her friend to go inside. As soon as Xing ran into the apartment, the protagonist's sister was shocked by what she saw. It turned out that on her friend's back, there were large bleeding wounds from the claws of the zombies, which still managed to catch up with their victim. Alarmed, Bai Xiyin immediately turned to her friend and asked if she didn't know that she was injured. To this, Xing replied with a sly smile that the girl had managed to expose her. Bai Xiyin immediately remembered her friend's words that if a person was harmed by a zombie, he himself would turn into a zombie, which alarmed the girl even more. Xing with madness and cunning in her eyes, said that judging by the conversations on the internet, if she took the Shandong pill, she still had hope for salvation. Then the girl pressed the main character's frightened sister against the front door, not allowing her to escape, and asked if she had this medicine at home. Suddenly, zombies began to break through the front door, wanting to feed on human flesh. The monsters were becoming more and more persistent, and it seemed that at any moment they would be able to open the doors and go inside. Xing was very unhappy with this, and feeling her condition worsening, she felt that she had already lost quite a lot of time. Without a moment's hesitation, the girl pushed Bai Xiyin out the door straight into the clutches of the bloodthirsty zombies, and along the way, the piglets would have bought her some time. After this, the scoundrel quickly closed the front door in order to remain in a safe place and not get hurt. Bai Xiyin desperately knocked on the door and asked the girl to let her in. Meanwhile, the zombies were already approaching her. For a moment, Xing thought about what she should do. It seemed like she was about to realize her mistake and open the door to her friend. Suddenly, the girl was overcome with anger, and so she confessed that she had always hated Bai Shiyin because she was born into a wealthier family and had never known need for anything. The girl continued to knock on the door and through tears asked why her friend treated her like that, since she always helped her. At this, Xing Er laughed loudly and said that the girl had really helped her, so she had to do it again, and in return receive emotional satisfaction from a good deed. Friend behind the door, as well as the growling of zombies who seemed to have caught up with their victim. The villain was very pleased and only hoped that the zombies would eat her friend to the last piece. Xing Er's joy didn't last long because she suddenly felt intense pain coming from the wounds on her back. Looking in the mirror, the girl realized that she needed to find Shangqing pills as quickly as possible. Otherwise, she would soon turn into an ugly creature. Without wasting any time, the scoundrel began to walk around the stranger's apartment in search of a box of medicines. Suddenly, she noticed a table in the living room on which there was already a small box with some medicines. Reading the name of these pills, Xing Er was very happy because this was exactly what she was looking for. The scoundrel was sure that now she was saved. Opening the box, Xing Er discovered that it was completely empty. She didn't understand where the pills could have gone and assumed that Xia Yun ate them all. Luckily for the girl, she found a receipt that said that her friend had bought a lot of these pills. So Xing Er set out again with great enthusiasm to search for a way to survive. For some time, the scoundrel carefully searched the entire apartment, looking into every corner, but this did not bring any results. Because of this, Xing Er began to get very nervous, realizing that with every minute she wasted, she had less and less time. The girl panicked and did not understand where the necessary medicines could be hidden and why she could not find them. Meanwhile, Xing Er's condition was getting worse and worse. She felt weak and her hands were changing color, becoming more and more like zombie hands. Out of despair and hopelessness, the girl could not contain her emotions and loudly closed her eyes. In this situation, this was all she could do. Suddenly, Xing Er's attention was drawn to the musical ringtone that was playing right next to her, but this was not a good sign. The girl was very surprised because she knew that it was her exclusive call that sounded when Bai Shiyin called her. Looking at the screen of her smartphone, the scoundrel made sure that her friend was indeed calling her right now. Xing Er was shocked and didn't understand how this was possible, but she still answered the call. Thanks to the fact that it was a video call, the girl saw that Bai Shiyin was completely safe and sound, which could not help but cause her to be shocked. Xing Er immediately began to ask in a trembling voice whether her friend had really died and how that was even possible. To this, Bai Shiyin merely showed her friend a handful of Shandong pills and asked if this was what she had been so desperately looking for. Seeing this medicine, Xing Er asked with despair and anger at the same time if all the pills were really with her friend. Without giving any answer, Bai Shiyin only briefly asked if the girl wanted to receive this medicine. Hearing this question, Xing Er felt hopeful, so she decided to act immediately to save her life. The girl began to tearfully ask her friend for forgiveness and say that she had simply temporarily lost her way because she had been very scared when the zombies attacked her. The scoundrel even began to bow low and beg for Bai Shiyin to share the medicine with her, insisting that she was a kind person. At the same time, the girl thought that Bai Shiyin definitely did not leave her in trouble, and as soon as she received the pills, he would immediately deal with his friend. Bai Shiyin. Seeing how her friend humiliated herself and begged for help, she coldly asked her to stop, after which she asked if Xing Er really hoped that she would believe her again. The scoundrel heard this and became very angry because she realized that her plans were not destined to come true. The girl continued to say that he always thought that the girl was just a child who had not yet matured, who did not receive a proper education in childhood, so he always tried to support her. Bai Shiyin suddenly fell silent for a moment, listening to the zombies' roar that echoed throughout the entire stairwell. The girl wasn't worried about it at all, so she kept asking if her friend had decided to take off her hypocritical shell as soon as the end of the world came. Xing Er, who was getting worse due to her illness, admitted her mistake and begged the girl for help. Hearing this, Bai Shiyin couldn't hold back her tears, so they slowly rolled down her cheek. Despite this, the girl replied that she wasn't that naive, so she wished her friend to go to hell. After this, the call was ended, and the scoundrel fell to the floor and began to choke. She could no longer resist the disease that was quickly taking over her body. The girl was quickly losing her mind, and the last thing she said was that she didn't want to die like this, but no one heard it. Soon, a loud human scream was heard from the stairwell, coming from Bai Shiyin's apartment, but it quickly died down. The girl, despite her confidence during the conversation with her friend who betrayed her, now felt very depressed. She did not want all this to happen at all. Because the girl was completely immersed in her thoughts about what happened, she did not notice the approach of the zombie, who decided to take advantage of this moment. Bai Xiyin quickly came to her senses when she saw the bloodthirsty monster sneaking up on her. Now the girl had to solve this problem as well. Unexpectedly, the girl used her newly acquired abilities in the hope that it would help her escape. Bai Xiyin's body literally became transparent, which helped her avoid the zombie's attack and quickly run away. Quickly descending the stairs, the girl remembered that when Xing Er threw her out the door, she thought that her life was over. At that moment, Bai Xiyin was very scared of the zombies that quickly surrounded her, and closing her eyes, did not notice at all that strange things began to happen to her body. Only after some time, realizing that she was still alive, the girl calmed down a little, opened her eyes and saw zombies who were in no hurry to attack her. Looking at her hands, she couldn't believe that her body had become transparent again, which meant that she hadn't imagined it that time. Taking advantage of this gift of fate, the girl quickly ran away, thanks to which she was able to escape from the bloodthirsty zombies. The monsters, of course, did not see their victim, but they heard her steps well, but did not even try to pursue her. Soon the girl stopped in a safe place to catch her breath and think. Bai Xiyin already knew that because her body became transparent, the zombies couldn't see her, but she felt that due to the ability, the energy in her body was rapidly decreasing. The girl realized that she couldn't stay in this state for too long, so she started to run away so that the zombies wouldn't notice her again. Bai Xiyin ran out into the street thinking that she needed to leave this place immediately. The girl ran as fast as she could and felt that her ability was about to stop working. Soon she had to stop again to rest because her strength was already at its limit. At that very moment she noticed that her ability had ceased to function, which meant that she was no longer safe. Bai Xiyin could clearly hear the loud roars of zombies that seemed to come from all the houses around. Moreover, this growling and human screams were heard throughout the city, which meant that there was simply no safe place anymore. Because of this, Bai Xiyin began to get very nervous and didn't understand what she was supposed to do now or where to go. Suddenly, someone from afar loudly called out to the girl, which instantly attracted her attention. It seemed that these people knew Bai Xiyin well. Looking in the direction from where the familiar voice was heard, Bai Xiyin saw her acquaintances Uncle Chen and Sister Wang. Without wasting time, the girl ran towards the people, along the way saying that they all needed to hide. Bai Xiyin suddenly stopped because she could no longer just trust people like before, even her acquaintances. Sister Wang asked the girl not to worry because they were not infected. After that, she said that they were walking around the residential complex, but after seeing a message in the group of residents, they decided to hide here. Having heard about the group of residents, the girl was very surprised and immediately took out her phone in order to check this group. One of the residents asked for help and posted a photo of a zombie in the group, which, according to him, appeared in house number 10. Bai Xiyin was shocked by what she saw because until the very end, she did not believe that the end of the world had really come. Uncle Chen also said that many people were trapped in the building and even more died. They called the emergency services, but no one answered. A guy named Min Min suddenly started crying and saying that he couldn't get in touch with his parents. He got a job here a few days ago, but didn't expect to encounter something like this. Sister Wang also began to worry a lot about what they should do now, because she was afraid that things would soon get much worse. Bai Xiyin was horrified that the entire capital was plunged into chaos, but she quickly came to her senses when she saw the impending danger. The girl, without wasting any time, loudly addressed her friends and warned them that zombies were approaching them. Turning back, the people saw that several monsters had turned their attention to them, and the only thing that saved them was a low iron fence. Suddenly, the zombies started talking about how they wanted to go home, and therefore demanded that the guard open the doors for them. Otherwise, they would file a complaint. Ming Ming hurried out of horror, and in the meantime, Uncle Chen grabbed the girl by the hand and asked her to quickly leave here. The zombies were very unhappy that they were not allowed into the house, so they began to get very angry and furiously declare that they were the owners of one of the apartments. At the same time, the enraged monsters tried with all their might to break down the iron fence in order to finally get into the territory of the residential complex. Seeing this, Bai Xiyin loudly asked the guard to go to the security room and get a stun gun there to somehow protect herself. Meanwhile, the zombies had already passed the obstacle in their path and were targeting Min Min, who seemed like easy prey to them. The guy, seeing the approaching danger, finally came to his senses and began to quickly run in order to take advantage of Bai Xiyin's advice. The guard took me into the security room where there really was an electric shock device on the table. Immediately after him, A zombie ran into the room wanting to finally grab his victim. The next moment, the frightened Min Min attacked the monster with all his might, hitting it on the head. From this, the zombie fell to the ground with a crash and no longer showed signs of aggression, but Min Min still remained on guard. Bai Shiyin, seeing all this, praised the guy for a good hit and was glad that no one was hurt. Min Min was also glad that he managed to survive and thoughtlessly believed that now no zombies were scary to him. Suddenly, everyone heard a loud sound that came from the heavy steps of an unknown person. It turned out that one of the zombies brought with him a large crowd of his own kind, which certainly weren't so easy for ordinary people to deal with. Seeing this, Bai Shiyin was dumbfounded with horror because she had already hoped that the danger had passed them. Min Min also didn't expect this, which is why all his confidence after killing one zombie quickly evaporated. Uncle Chen and Sister Wang were not prepared for this at all, so now they could only tremble in fear and hope for the best. Suddenly, the zombies, having noticed their victims, suddenly broke away and ran towards the people in order to tear them to pieces. Seeing this, Bai Shiyin loudly ordered her acquaintances to run quickly, since it was useless to fight in this situation. Soon the girl stopped abruptly because she saw that the path was blocked by another group of zombies. It turned out that the people were already surrounded. All the survivors realized with horror that they no longer had any hope of salvation, which meant that this was their end. At that very moment, a strange phenomenon appeared in the sky which resembled a huge crack in space. Right on the territory of the residential complex, a huge monster jumped out of a crack which resembled a spider with a demon's head. The landing of this monster instantly provoked a small earthquake, which caused thick clouds of dust to rise and the asphalt road to become covered with cracks. The demon immediately began to attack the surviving zombies as if he did not consider them his allies and did not want to share the spoils with them. Bai Shiyin did not expect at all that on top of everything else today she would also have to see a huge demon, which is why she fell into a stupor. The monster saw the frightened girl, but was in no hurry to deal with them as quickly as with the zombies, as if he realized that this was a living person. Soon after, the entire area of the residential complex was covered with a strong web, on which a demon sat and loudly declared that all the prey belonged to him. Bai Shiyin was captured and completely immobilized by the same web. Despite all her attempts, she was unable to escape. Sister Wang was also bound by the web, and so she only asked for help and begged the monster to let her go. At this, the spider demon only growled loudly, as if demonstrating his victory and superiority over people. After this, the monster fell silent and froze on its huge web, as if it was waiting for something. Meanwhile, Bai Shiyin was wondering what kind of monster it was and why it suddenly fell from the sky. "Look at the sky!" The girl began to worry a lot about the fact that soon more similar monsters would appear from the crack. After that, Bai Shiyin remembered Jia's words. Yana, who spoke about the end of the world beginning, realized that he knew everything in advance. The girl was interrupted from these thoughts by the sudden approach of a spider demon from whom she did not know what to expect. Meanwhile, Xia Yan stood calmly on a high pole and looked down where a large gathering of zombies was visible. It turned out that all these monsters had already been defeated and were literally lying on top of each other, forming a large pile of rotting bodies. All this was closely watched from around the corner by the surviving people, who could not help but take advantage of the chance to film the main character. Xia Yan didn't expect that on the way to the second demon he would get into such a situation, but fortunately, he managed to find something that only second-level zombies had. After using this crystal, the protagonist could slightly enhance his abnormal abilities, so he immediately took advantage of this opportunity. Then the guy decided to continue his journey, thinking along the way that the zombies were also evolving and becoming stronger. Unexpectedly, Xiaoyan was approached by one of the survivors, and thanking him for saving him, said that he had been broadcasting live the whole time, which already had more than 10,000 people. Hearing this, the main character snapped his fingers, after which a small explosion thundered in the survivor's hand. The guy did not immediately understand what had happened. It turned out that Xia Yan, using his abilities, blew up the survivor's phone, which made him very unhappy, but the main character didn't care. The guy silently headed into one of the stores while people watched with confusion at what he was about to do. Xia Yan slowly looked around and thought that there were already quite a few people who knew about superpowers. In addition, the guy noticed that the entire store had already been searched and the goods had been dismantled, so he had to go to the warehouse, which was locked. There were only a few boxes of canned instant noodles and other food. There weren't many things, but the guy considered it a good catch. Without wasting time, the main character, using his abilities, quickly transferred all these things to the other world, to the Tower of Demons, because he was not going to just leave them here. After that, Xia Yan also calmly headed towards the exit, while the survivors continued to watch him in bewilderment. Suddenly, one of the guys turned to the main character and asked if he could help them again. Xiaoyan stopped silently, already understanding what kind of help the surviving people were asking him for. He was not at all happy about this, however, and simply could not leave. The guy quickly handed over a few packs of instant noodles to the survivors and wished them to be careful. The people were very grateful to the guy. After that, Xiaoyan left and the survivors began to discuss how lucky they were to meet this mysterious man and who he really was. Despite this, one of the survivors did not consider Jia at all. Yanya was a good person and was unhappy that his comrades were so grateful to him. He really didn't like the fact that the main character took all the food for himself and gave them only a few packs of instant noodles. The second guy reminded his friend that Xiaoyan saved their lives, but the survivor insisted that no one asked him to do this. In addition, the main character broke the guy's phone to say with dissatisfaction that thanks to the broadcast, he could become very famous. But Xiaoyan ruined everything and then took all the food that was supposed to be divided equally. The villain also complained that there was already information on the internet about some people who had received superpowers. The guy did not understand why he could not have such power. Suddenly, the survivor loudly declared that if he had superpowers, he would definitely become a great hero and save everyone. He promised that he would not be as selfish as Jia Yan. The guys supported their friend because they were unhappy that the main character did not help them until the end. They even began to assume that all these disasters were caused by these very people with superpowers. Suddenly, one of the survivors asked his comrades to get dressed and say something like that. Because anyway, Xia Yan saved all their lives. The guy who started this whole conversation was unhappy with what he heard and thought that his friend was ready to accept the injustice and be content with just one pack of instant noodles. Suddenly, a stranger appeared behind the guy, asking if he was the one broadcasting live on the internet and where the person he filmed had gone. Turning back, the guy saw the man who was addressing him, which is why his confidence quickly disappeared somewhere. The survivors saw a group of armed men who surrounded them. This group was led by Sun Shijun, who insisted that people should have shared the information more quickly. Song family's subordinates began beating up the survivors in order to get the answers they needed from them. One of the guys still began to beg the attackers not to beat him, after which he told them which way Xiaoyang had gone. He did not understand at all why these people attacked them. Sun Shijun smiled slyly and held a pack of instant noodles in his hand and suddenly asked the guy why he thought they were beating them. The guy assumed that the attackers wanted to take this food from them and therefore was not at all against voluntarily giving it up. The next moment, Sun Shijun mercilessly kicked the guy in the head while saying that he was wrong in his answer. After this, the scoundrel, continuing to smile, silently gave one of his subordinates a sign. The guy who was behind immediately dragged him to Sun. Shijun had the body of a zombie that was still alive, even though it couldn't move. The frightened survivor did not understand what awaited him ahead, so in a trembling voice he asked what the villain was going to do. Sun Shijun showed off a living zombie head and laughingly replied that he was going to conduct a small experiment. Unexpectedly, Sun Shijun brought the living head of the zombie to the survivor who was captured by his subordinates, which scared the guy very much. The zombie immediately bit the man, causing him to start screaming loudly. A dangerous virus immediately entered the body of the innocent guy. Sun watched all this with a smile. Shijun asked the guy not to be nervous because he was dedicating himself to humanity's victories over zombies. Despite this, the survivor still screamed loudly because his fear and pain were unbearable. Meanwhile, Song's subordinate Shijun calmly watched what was happening and was surprised at how quickly the zombie ate the man, even with his insides. The monster mercilessly ate its still living victim, completely ignoring the splashes of blood that flew everywhere. Finally, Sun Shijun stopped all this as soon as he cut off the zombie's head from the remains of its body. With this, his goal was achieved. After this, the villain put the monster's head on his dagger in order to get the reason for which this experiment was conducted. Looked at the crystal he had managed to get with great pleasure. It seemed he knew its purpose well. He knew that once the zombies ate enough people, they could condense such crystalline cores within themselves. Without wasting time, Sun Shijun used this item and felt how its ability was strengthened. The guy assumed that if a few more of these crystals were used, he would be able to overcome the barrier and become stronger. The villain's subordinates asked if the boy was planning to become even stronger in order to fight Jia Yanem. They also said that they had already mastered a method that would allow them to launch mass production of these crystals. Sun Shijun, you will answer that now, the most important thing for him was to kill the main character, and there was no need to worry about the crystals because there were still many second-level zombies in the city. After this, the villain ordered his subordinates to kill the survivors so that they would not blab too much. The guys begged for mercy, but this was no longer possible. One of the subordinates mercilessly and with great pleasure swung his weapon, which grew right out of his hand. Splashes of blood immediately discharged to the sides. The seriously wounded but still alive guys saw that the attackers also had superpowers, so they realized that they definitely wouldn't be able to leave here alive. At that moment, the survivors realized that in the eyes of gifted people, they were no different from pigs and dogs, so there was no point in expecting mercy. The guys, seeing how their comrade was cut into pieces, were very sorry that Xiaoyan simply left after saving them. Suddenly, one of the survivors began to blame the main character for all the troubles, who, instead of helping them to the end, simply left them here. Meanwhile, Song's subordinate Shijun made a few more swings with his weapon, after which the screams of his victims ceased. Sun Shijun's brother told his subordinates that all this noise had already stopped and ordered them to leave because they still had a lot of things to do. At that very moment, some object flashed across the sky at great speed, leaving behind a bright streak. Soon after, a loud explosion was heard in the distance, which attracted the attention of the villains. They began to assume that the cause of this sound was the collapse of a multi-story building. After that, Sun Shijun quickly jumped into the car and ordered to go in that direction and said that Jia was somewhere there. Yan. Soon the villains were already driving to the site of the explosion in order to meet the main character there. Meanwhile, Xiaoyan was indeed heading to where the mysterious object fell from the sky, because he knew very well what it was. The main character understood that he was already a little late, so he needed to hurry. The guy was getting closer and closer to the place where his new opponent fell, not noticing at all that he was already in a well-known area. Xiaoyan thought that he still had about 2,000 meters to go and believed that with his speed, he would quickly reach the desired location. The main character ran out from around the corner of one of the houses, already understanding that his goal was right ahead. Xiaoyan was shocked when he saw his opponent, which left him momentarily dumbfounded. The guy saw a huge demon spider that had spread its web across the entire residential complex. Also, at that very moment, the monster was trying to eat Uncle Chen alive, whose leg he had already pierced with his sharp claw. Sister Wang was very worried about her relative and could not believe that he would now lose his life. At this moment, Bai Shiyin desperately tried to escape from the web so as not to become the demon's next victim. No matter how hard the girl tried, she could not break this web, so she did not know what she should do next. Suddenly, the girl remembered her ability to become transparent and thought that it could help her in this situation. Bai Shiyin began to try with all her might to activate her power, but she still didn't know how to do it correctly. After several unsuccessful attempts, the girl realized that she did not have enough energy, so she could not cope with this task. Now she did not know at all what to do. At this moment, Bai Shiyin heard the pitiful voice of Sister Wang, who was frightened and begged to save her and her grandfather. This gave the girl motivation, so she began to desperately remember how she was able to get her superpower. She finally remembered that her strength came from taking the Shandong pills that she just happened to have in her pocket. Bai Shiyin didn't waste any time and reached into his pocket to get the medicine he needed. But at that moment, the spider demon had already grabbed Sister Wang to devour her just like her grandfather. The girl's hands were bound by a web, so she took out one tablet and deftly tossed it to her mouth in the hope that she would be able to catch it. Bai Shiyin had succeeded in accomplishing what she had planned, so now she was only begging for the medicine to work faster, since the demon had already opened its mouth to eat its victim. Soon the girl felt a surge of energy, so she immediately tried to use her superpower. This attracted the attention of the huge monster, which caused it to decide to postpone its meal for a while. Looking at where another of his victims was imprisoned, the spider demon saw no one, which meant that Bai Shiyin had managed to use his ability after all. The monster was confused and did not understand where the girl could have gotten dressed, since even his web was not damaged at all. At that moment, the demon suddenly felt severe pain because one of his paws was somehow damaged. It turned out that the reason for this was Xiaoyan, who intended to attack the monster in order to save Sister Wang from the prospect of being eaten. After this, the main character drew his fiery sword and prepared to fight the spider demon while freeing the rescued girl from the strong web. Sister Wang immediately started running away to find a safe place, while Xiaoyan remained fearlessly standing in place and waiting for his opponent to attack. The guy looked at the monster and remembered that the shell of this demon had a certain resistance to fire. Meanwhile, the monster, having seen the main character, had already begun to anticipate what he would taste like and wanted to eat him as quickly as possible. In order to quickly satisfy his hunger, the demon rushed at Jia with lightning speed. Yana wanted to grab him. Despite the quick attack, the protagonist managed to easily jump aside and prepare his response. The guy walked towards his opponent and swung a huge fire axe, not wanting to show the monster any mercy. The next moment, there was a loud explosion, which unfortunately did not harm the demon at all. The monster still intended to catch his opponent alive, so he released a large net of his strong web at him, which was supposed to immobilize the guy. Despite this danger, Xiaoyan remained calm and reasonable, so he quickly reacted and used his golden eye. At that very moment, the web burst into a bright flame and began to burn quickly, which discouraged the spider demon. Without wasting any time, the monster loudly called his children to help him deal with the main character. Soon the guy heard strange sounds coming from the multi-story buildings around him. Gradually, they became louder. Xiaoyan couldn't believe that this was really happening and was already anticipating a very difficult situation for himself. Just a few moments later, the guy witnessed how hordes of red spiders began to crawl out of all the doors and windows, responding to the call of the demon spider. They all quickly rushed towards the main character in order to fight him. Very fast, Xiaoyan found himself surrounded by small spiders, which posed the same danger to him as the demon spider. Meanwhile, Sun Shijun and his subordinate drove carelessly through the streets of the deserted city, completely ignoring the zombies that fell under the wheels of the car. One of the subordinates took great pleasure in dealing with monsters and sometimes received crystals for this, rejoicing at his luck. Sun Shijun was also pleased with this and assumed that if he absorbed 8 of these crystals, he would be able to advance his abilities to the next level. Suddenly, one of his subordinates, in an alarmed voice, drew the guy's attention to what was happening ahead. It turned out that the villains had almost reached the right place, because on their way they began to encounter a huge web. But they did not expect to see a huge spider's nest here. Driving further and further, the villains noticed that there was a passage in the web, so they immediately assumed that this was the work of Jia. Yana. One of the subordinates felt uneasy, so he asked Sun Shijun, "Are they really going to go there?" At this moment, one of the guys noticed a big red spider and therefore warned his comrades to be careful. After that, he quickly used his ability and attacked the monster. Despite a direct hit on the target, the spider remained alive. This alarmed the boys, so one of Song's subordinates, Shijun, had to take out his gun and use his ability. The guy managed to hit the target exactly, but even a shot from a firearm could not defeat this spider. Eventually, Sun himself took up the matter. Shijun, who mercilessly attacked the suddenly appearing enemy with his bare hands. After a powerful blow, blood gushed out from the monster's body and landed on Sun. Shijun guy thought it was very disgusting. The scoundrel then assumed that there might be crystals in this monster, so he furiously tore his opponent apart but found nothing. Suddenly, the guy began to lick the spider's blood from his hands because he felt that it contained a considerable amount of real energy, which was in those very crystals. From this process, Song Shijun was distracted by the sudden explosion. Raising his head, he and his subordinate saw a huge spider that was just being attacked by someone. It turned out that the cause of this explosion was Jia Yan, who with all his fury and sword in hand, rushed at the spider demon. Sun Shijun was very surprised, but let's assume that the protagonist fought this monster in order to gain a huge benefit after killing the monster. Hearing this, one of the subordinates asked the guy what they were supposed to do now. Sun Shijun, continuing to watch the main character, thought that now they should wait until the guy attracted the attention of all the opponents. The villain planned to take advantage of the moment and absorb as much energy as possible from the small spiders, after which he would destroy the weakened demon and, at the same time, Jia. Yana. Meanwhile, the main character, not yet knowing about the villain's plan, was fighting the spider demon and was completely focused on it. The guy had to confront not only the demon, but also all of his children, who quickly surrounded him and who seemed to have no end. In order to withstand such a number of opponents, the main character had to use his abilities to create a fire scythe which could cope with the quick killing of small monsters. Xiaoyan made sweeping movements with his weapon, spreading tongues of flame around himself and driving away the spiders. Finally, the guy decided to go on the attack, so he rushed forward with lightning speed, continuing to swing his scythe. In order to hinder the main character, the spider demon, together with its children, began to release a web at their opponent in the hopes of tying him up. Despite the danger of Xiaoyan was able to use his abilities in time and using fire, completely burn away the web, thereby securing his path. After that, the guy stood firmly on the ground and prepared for a counterattack. The main character skillfully swung his weapon from side to side, thereby setting all his small opponents on fire. Soon, only ashes remained from the spiders. Next, Xia Yan wasted no time in striking the spider demon, causing it to scream loudly in terrible pain. During the fight, the guy asked if the demon really wanted to devour him, using his little spiders for this. He was ready to check what was faster, the process of birth of new spiders or the swings of his weapon. Unable to withstand such an onslaught, the demon eventually fell to the ground exhausted but not yet dead. Thanks to this, the main character was able to pay attention to what was happening below, and was very surprised when he saw Sun Shijun and his subordinates. The villains were actively killing small spiders while Song Shijun humbly waited for a new portion of demonic blood. Finally, the enemy was defeated, and his shell was pierced, causing green blood to gush out. Sun Shijun was very pleased with this result, and without wasting any time, began to tear off pieces from the defeated enemy in order to conveniently drink his blood. The guy took sip after sip with great pleasure, because he felt how, thanks to the blood, he was becoming stronger and stronger. Sun Shijun was determined to drink it all down to the last drop without thinking about the consequences. Meanwhile, the main character watched what was happening and could not believe that Sun Shijun had also already become the owner of superpowers. The guy remembered that in his past life, this scoundrel had really achieved great results. The subordinate was very surprised at how strong his boss had become, and believed that Xia was now Yan could not escape. Sun Shijun agreed with this, but suggested not to rush and continue hunting spiders. Having found another spider, the villain with a sly smile said that he already felt the dependence on the blood of these monsters, and assumed that this is how the thirst for power felt. Xia calmly addressed the guys. Yan said that they behaved simply disgustingly, and that their taste preferences were even worse than those of zombies. The villains were surprised by the guy's appearance, but suddenly, one of them began to wonder where the spider demon was now, if the main character was here. Xia Yan calmly pointed his finger at the monster that was quickly approaching the villains, and asked if it was him they were looking for. After that, the guy started running away to a safe place, while talking about how Sun Shijun and his subordinates like to eat spiders, then they should apologize to their mother. As a result, the villains were left alone with the bloodthirsty monster, and realizing the full danger of this, were momentarily dumbfounded. Although the guys tried not to draw any attention to themselves, the spider demon saw that Xia Yan had already run away and looked at the villains. The monster saw the frightened Sun Shijun and his subordinates, who stood among the corpses of small spiders covered in their blood. The demon was enraged by what he saw, so he loudly called his children for help and ordered them to tear the villains to shreds. To the frightened son, Shijun could only desperately fight off the spider's attacks and hope that he wouldn't die here today. Xia watched everything that was happening from a safe place. Yan also said that his ex and best friend deserved to be in this situation. Sun Shijun touched upon hearing these words and loudly addressed the main character and ordered him to wait for him, because he also had superpowers and therefore would definitely be able to destroy him. To all the threats of Sun, the main character praised Shijun with a smile and then said that he wanted to talk to the guy about something. The guy's speech was interrupted by a spider demon who suddenly appeared in front of him and growled loudly, making it clear that he had not forgotten about his opponent. Xia Yan decided that he had to deal with the monster first, so he asked Sun to Shijun waited for him and did not die yet. The villain was very unhappy that the main character underestimated him so much that he even began to tremble with anger. At that moment, one of his subordinates approached the guy and said in an excited voice that he was almost out of bullets, so he had to retreat. Sun Shijun immediately declared that there was no way to retreat because they needed to kill Xia. Yana the scoundrels did not receive these words with enthusiasm. Suddenly, the main heir of the Song family was overcome with a violent rage, which even made his appearance more sinister. The subordinates did not understand what was happening to their master. Sun's body, Shijun, was changing before our eyes and becoming larger, but the spider that suddenly attacked decided to interfere with this process. Surprisingly, the guy was able to react in time and easily grab the monster before it could harm him. Next, the distraught Sun Shijun bit into the spider with his teeth and tore off its head, causing green blood to spray out in all directions. Having drunk this liquid, the scoundrel began to laugh loudly and rejoice that he had become stronger again. After that, he strictly ordered his subordinates to continue catching spiders and putting them on him so that he could become stronger and definitely defeat Xia. Yana. Unexpectedly, Sun Shijun, without even looking, used one hand to catch the spider that was trying to attack him, which was a good demonstration of his intentions. Then the guy easily crushed the monster, threatening his subordinates to do the same to them if they ever talked about retreating again. The villains were very impressed by their master's strength, and so promised that they would kill as many spiders as needed to defeat Jia. Yana. Meanwhile, the main character was completely focused on the battle with the spider demon. He managed to attack this monster, but it was not very successful. The guy understood that the reason for his failure was that the monster's shell was still too hard. That was why the spider demon was determined to continue the battle and did not allow his opponent to stop for a moment to rest. Suddenly, from the strange movements of the monster, it became clear that he had something in mind and intended to use his web for this. The next moment, the demon pushed off strongly and jumped high up, thus ending up above Jia, Yanam, who didn't know what to expect. Having chosen the right moment, the spider demon released a huge web that could cover not only the main character, but also the entire street. The guy couldn't just burn such a large web, so he could only watch as it quickly covered him. Very soon, Jiayan found himself in a shop from which he could not escape despite his efforts. The spider demon did not want to waste time, so he began to wrap his victim in web even more tightly, so that it would definitely not be able to get out. A few minutes later, Jiayan was completely wrapped in a thick cocoon of webbing, which did not allow him to even move. The monster was very happy about his victory and carefully examined the cocoon, wanting to thoroughly enjoy the captured man who had resisted for so long. Meanwhile, the main character was not worried at all, and only asked how the monster could get so close to him because it was very risky. The demon was very angry because Jiayan was so confident in himself, but the guy's words made him wary. The next moment, a small spark flared up inside the cocoon, causing the entire web to catch fire, and along with it, the spider demon itself. The demon did not believe that the main character managed to replace him in the trap, but he could not do anything about it. Soon, a huge raging flame rose into the sky, completely engulfing the bloodthirsty monster from another world. Shia himself, Yan, watched from a safe distance as his opponent burned in the fire and only waited for the moment to deliver the finishing blow. Finally, the main character approached his opponent and said that there was only one road to heaven, but the monster would not go along it, but would go to hell, from which there was no exit. The next moment, the demon's body turned to ashes and scattered around the area as if it had never existed. Jiayan. I saw that after the monster's death, there remained a valuable crystal that would help him become stronger, but the guy was more interested in where his opponent's soul went. Suddenly, the main character heard the insidious voice of a demon nearby, who said that the guy had fallen for his trick. At this moment, the voice of one of Jia's subordinates, Yana, warned him to be careful because danger was approaching him from behind. Hearing this, the guy, without looking, suddenly grabbed the soul of the demon, who did not expect this at all, and wondered where the main character got such incredible power from. The soul of the monster desperately tried to escape, but with each passing second it felt that Xia Yan squeezed her tighter and tighter. In the end, the protagonist mercilessly crushed the soul of his opponent, which marked his final victory. Xia Yan immediately crushed the soul of the spider demon and absorbed the energy contained within it. The main character immediately reached the 4th level of his superpowers, which made him very happy. Suddenly, the boy felt a new energy begin to spread in the demon prison. All the prisoners witnessed how Jia's ability Yana moved to a new level and acquired the name Firewatching. The main character himself did not fully understand what was happening, which is why this situation scared him a little. In addition, he felt a strong heat in his eye. Suddenly, the guy saw a city in front of him as if it was looking at him from the sky. His attention was especially drawn to the bright flame, which was even higher than some skyscrapers. The main character quickly realized that this flame in the center of the city was himself. It was as if he was looking at himself from the outside. Besides this, Xiaoyan saw other fires, but they were blue. The guy assumed that these were demons that had already fallen from the sky. The main character also suggested that his new ability allowed him to intuitively see powerful anomalous energy, thanks to which he could determine the location of monsters and strong people. Now the guy understood why his new ability was called Fire Observation, and believed that it was really useful. Suddenly, the main character turned his attention to the girls, who were completely exhausted after meeting the spider demon. Xiaoyan was shocked when he saw Bai Shiyin, because he remembered that she was his younger sister's teacher. The guy didn't understand what she was doing here, but he was surprised that she had awakened the ability of invisibility in herself. The main character did not have time to think everything over properly, because his attention was drawn to loud sounds that were heard nearby. The cause of these sounds was Sun Shijun, who had been continuously absorbing the blood of spiders all this time. The villain felt an incredible surge of strength and was very happy about it. He loudly declared that everyone had to die and that he needed to become even stronger. Soon the boy moved to the 2nd level of his superpower, from which his muscles increased significantly. but his mind was already clouded by the thirst for greater strength. Sun Shijun knew that abilities were divided into 10 levels and considered it a true blessing. The guy anticipated that after reaching the 10th level, he would become a god and claimed that he had already entered this path. Unexpectedly, Sun Shijun saw Jia nearby Yana, who was calmly watching him. Unable to contain his murderous impulse, the villain rushed at the main character with lightning speed. I believe that now he had enough strength to fight him, said with malice in his voice, that Xia Yan has always been worse than him in everything, and this case will be no exception. Sun Shijun proudly declared that he was already at the second level of his superpower and believed that Xia Yan can't do anything against this. That is why the villain confidently ordered the main character to kneel and kiss his feet. In return, he promised to save his life. The next moment, a strong blow to the face caused Sun Shijun suddenly fell silent and tasted his own blood. It turned out that Xia Yan had no intention of enduring insults from the scoundrel, so he decided to teach him a lesson without wasting time. The main character's blow was so strong that Sun Shijun flew far back, turning over several times and hitting the ground. While the scoundrel was trying to catch his breath, he came to his senses after what had happened to Jia. Yan slowly approached his enemy. Sun Shijun didn't understand how this was possible, because he was already at the second level of superpowers, so he asked the main character how he was able to defeat him. To this, Xia Yan asked the villain what level he thought he already had. The main character also thanked his opponent for the fact that his family gave him a lot of money, which helped him a lot. Son. After hearing this, Shijun began to deny reality and say that all of this was impossible. The worried guy reached for the remains of the spiders in order to drink the blood and become even stronger. The villain greedily swallowed the demon blood and continued to talk about how he could still become stronger and kill Jia. Yana. The main character watched all this with a smile, not even trying to stop his enemy. Suddenly the guy said that Sun Shijun had always been a cautious person, but this time he was in a hurry. The scoundrel did not understand what these words meant. The main characters explained that in the past, the guy would have first conducted an experiment and looked at the result instead of recklessly swallowing demon blood without even thinking about the side effects. Sun Shijun thought that his enemy was saying all this only to stop him and prevent him from becoming stronger, so the villain demanded that Xia Yan fell silent. The guy loudly insisted that he was following the path of God because he was the chosen one who wanted to become stronger. Xia Yan smiled at the words about the path of God and asked if the scoundrel would like to take another close look at this path. Suddenly, Sun Shijun seemed to be transported to another world where there was only him. The guy looked at the huge tree and was amazed at its beauty. He once again thought that the main character was simply afraid of his strength, so he tried in every way to distract him and interfere. In the end, the villain declared that he was ready to continue the battle with Jia. Yanem threatened that this time, the guy would not be able to remain unharmed. Don't waste time. Sun Shijun decided to demonstrate his strength to the enemy and therefore, swinging his fist, rushed at the main character. Suddenly, the guy stopped abruptly because he felt danger. Looking at his leg, he saw how an ominous energy grabbed him. The villain saw that he was standing on the edge of an abyss, and below him were demonic creatures who wanted to grab him. Then the guy heard many ominous voices that asked him to come down to them and merge with them. This scared Sun very much, Shijun, which is why he even began to beg for help. Then the scoundrel noticed his hands, which began to turn blue. This alarmed him even more because he did not understand what was happening. Xia Yan, watching this, realized that his opponent was being consumed by a virus that turned people into zombies. The guy was surprised that Sun Shijun didn't notice this before. Sun Shijun was shocked by what was happening and did not understand why this was happening to him since he was the owner of a superpower. Xia Yan. He said that absorbing too much energy from zombies and aliens caused indigestion, but it was still possible to escape. Hearing this, Sun Shijun began asking about how everything could be fixed and begged the protagonist to help him. Xia Yan still replied that the method that was supposed to help the villain was taking the Shandong pill. Sun Shijun was shocked by this answer because he didn't expect at all that the main character would actually help him. Xia Yan continued to say that the guy should take several pills a day because they calmed and cleansed the body. He also shouldn't forget about training and continue to follow the path of God. From everything that Sun heard, Shijun couldn't control his emotions and suddenly burst into tears. Pills with him, and in return he swore to carry out all his orders. Zia's surprise, Yanhee replied that he didn't need anything in return from the guy because they were real friends. Sun Shijun. I was very happy to hear this and was now confident that I could survive. The next moment, A powerful kick from the main character caught up with the gullible scoundrel. Along with this, Xia Yan wanted his opponent to die early, without waiting for the disease to completely take over his body. Then the main character, with a rather satisfied smile on his face, reminded that Sun Shijun wanted to harm not only him but also his sister. But even despite this, he once already let him go. Xia Yan I thought that the scoundrel didn't know what gratitude was, and on top of everything else, he was driving himself into the grave. Finally, the guy said that with this approach, even the gods won't be able to save Sun Shijun. After that, he was about to leave. Shangqin pills. To this, Xia Yan showed a small box of medicine and asked if these were the pills the guy was talking about. Sun Shijun immediately confirmed this and began to reach for the medicine, but Xia Yan, with a sly smile on his face, declared that one box would not be enough to save himself. Sun Shijun was shocked by this answer and sincerely wanted to know how many pills were needed. The protagonist stated that at least a ton of this medicine was needed, and if the Song family managed to get these pills, they would be able to painlessly improve their gifted subordinates. The guy also said that if he and Sun, if Shijun were still close friends, he would have given him the necessary medicine without hesitation. But now that was impossible. After this, the main character again began to leave, saying for the last time that the scoundrel deserved to die from illness. Sun very angry. Shijun therefore gathered all his strength and rushed at Xia Yan, wanted to take revenge on him for everything he said. The main character knew perfectly well about the approaching danger, but remained just as calm and reasonable, knowing full well that he would be able to easily defeat the enemy. Suddenly, someone pierced Song's head with a sharp blow. Shijun wielded a sharp iron stick as if he didn't want the villain to harm the protagonist. Xia Yan was very surprised when he saw that it was that same teacher, Bai Shiyin, who did it. The girl looked very determined and did not regret her actions at all. Only when she was convinced that the danger for the main character had passed did she exhale heavily and allow herself to tremble with excitement. Xia Yan turned to the girl and said that he did not expect her to be capable of such an act. Bai Shiyin replied that the reason for this was the conversation that she had dried up. The girl remembered her friend who betrayed her, so she understood what the main character felt. She believed that the guy did not want to kill the villain on his own, so she did it instead of him. Also, the still excited Bai Shiyin thanked the guy for telling her to buy Shandong pills a few days ago. Then the girl tightly clutched the piece of iron pipe, which showed her determination. Bai Shiyin isn't done with Song yet. Shijun therefore pulled out her weapon from the scoundrel's head and prepared to finish the job. After that, the girl, without wasting any time, began to beat Sun's lifeless body. Shijunya had heard on the internet that after killing a fairly strong zombie, crystals dropped. Soon, Bai Shiyin's efforts were crowned with success. She saw something shiny fly out of the scoundrel's head. The girl was happy with her find and immediately dreamed of looking at it. Xia Yan was very surprised that the man with superpowers who turned into a zombie actually had a crystal core. Next, Bai Shiyin handed the crystal to the protagonist, but he confidently refused and stated that this thing belonged to the girl. Bai Shiyin did not refuse and thanked the guy once again for everything he had done for her. Then she tightly squeezed the crystal in her hand, still not understanding how it should be used. The girl immediately felt how her expended energy was restored and even increased significantly. But she understood that she should not overdo it so as not to turn into a monster. Along with this, Xia Yan, he said that the girl's ability was quite interesting and believed that it would help Bai Shiyin survive if she studied it well. Suddenly, the girl turned to the main character, and although she didn't know him well, she wanted to make a deal with him. Xia Yan was very surprised by this. Bai Shiyin then remembered the spider demon and asked if the guy really hunted such monsters. The girl looked at the sky and assumed that over time, these creatures would become more and more numerous, but the main character needed to hunt them to improve his abilities. Xia Yan was surprised at how observant the girl was. Bai Shiyin continued to say that the guy would not be able to kill all the monsters on his own. That is why the girl believed that in this matter, she could perhaps help the main character. Xia Yan was shocked when he realized that Bai Shiyin wanted to offer him her help in killing demons. The girl asked the main character to give her a chance to prove her worth because she could gather information, search for resources, and even use herself as bait. Hearing all this, the guy directly asked why Bai Shiyin was so eager to take on this job. Bai Shiyin. Without thinking twice, he decisively answered that she had to become stronger in order to survive. The girl's confidence quickly disappeared because she thought that the main character might feel awkward about her proposal and therefore refuse her. To this, Xia Yan said that he wanted Bai Shiyin to go to Chunhua Hospital and kill the monster that had taken up residence there. As proof, he needed a trophy. The girl agreed to these conditions without hesitation and without wasting any time set off on her journey. Xiaoyan finally warned his friend that the monster that lived in the hospital was as strong as the spider demon. Bai Shiyin confidently replied that if she couldn't deal with the monster, she wouldn't be able to survive in this new world, so she would find a way to complete the task. After that, Bai Shiyin Ajia left Yan remained standing in place and thought about everything he heard from the girl. The main character liked the fact that Bai Shiyin was so ambitious, so he decided to help her a little. Using his ability, he directed a stream of energy at the girl who didn't even notice anything. Now everything was under the control of the main character. He intended to fulfill his promise if his friend completed the task. The main character was not against finding an assistant, so he was not going to lose sight of this girl. Xiaoyan smiled sincerely and suggested not to delay, but to solve the problems that had arisen together. Meanwhile, the Song family's villa was in chaos due to the latest disappointing news. Sun Tian was deeply grieving for his only son and did not hold back his emotions because he already knew what had happened to him. Subordinates reported that Xiaoyan became very strong, but they managed to find out where his younger sister was hiding, which could be used for revenge. Hearing this, the man was immediately consumed by rage, and the only thing he could think about now was the punishment for the main character. The villain wished for his subordinates to kill the girl and take away all of Shangqin's pills, of which she probably had in abundance. In a very short time, Sun Tian gathered a small army and ordered everyone to follow him and attack the survivors, taking everything of value from them. The man believed that no matter how strong the main character was, his younger sister was just an ordinary person who could not do anything to protect herself. Moreover, the scoundrel knew that Xiaoyan was now in the city center, so he was sure that he would not have time to come to his sister's aid. Meanwhile, an unsuspecting Xiaoyun watched the news, which reported on terrorist attacks that were happening all over the city. The presenter also reported that the epidemic continued to spread, so all people should stay at home and wait for rescue. Xiaoyun was shocked by everything that was happening and listened with bated breath as experts explained that the epidemic was linked to the release of nuclear waste into wastewater. Suddenly, right during a live broadcast, one of the infected burst into the studio and began attacking the news anchor. At this point, the television broadcast suddenly stopped, making it impossible to find out whether the woman had been able to escape. Alarmed by what was happening, Xiaoyun looked out the window and saw a huge blood-colored moon that did not bode well. Soon the sky was covered with thick black clouds, which brought down a flurry of bright lightning on the city. The loud pouring rain masked all the noise that was heard outside. Xiaoyun watched all this through the window with concern and wondered if everything was okay with her brother. The baby asked the girl not to worry and assured her that given the guy's strength, little could harm him. Then he asked if Jia had already thought about it. Yun about what ability she wanted to learn. The girl replied that she had 3 amulets that could transmit her anomalous ability, but she did not know which one to choose. Xiaoyun thought about this choice for a long time, because she took into account not only her own interests. Still, she was determined to make a choice and was ready to take responsibility for it, so she stretched out her hand forward. The girl believed that it was this ability that would help her brother the most. At that very moment, streams of energy began to swirl in the room, on which mysterious inscriptions were visible. The little one praised the girl for her choice and said that she was a truly kind person. Then the turtle suggested not to waste time and begin the learning process, from which streams of energy rushed towards Xiaoyun. The girl immediately began to receive a colossal amount of information, which shocked her, so Kroha asked her not to rush and concentrate. The turtle also said that all this knowledge would be revealed to the girl gradually as her abilities grew, so there was no point in memorizing everything at once. Xiaoyun immediately took advantage of Kroha's advice, which made it much easier for her to absorb all this information. The turtle continued to tell that the talismans with abilities were given to her by the great master, who, before his departure, ordered them to be kept for a fateful person. That's why Kroha had never studied these techniques and now didn't know how much information Jia could absorb. Yun from the first time. Suddenly the turtle interrupted her speech because she sensed the approach of danger coming from the street. At this moment, the administrative task of the zoo in which Xia was hiding several cars with armed men drove up to Yun. Sun Tian turned to his 3 subordinates who possessed superpowers and ordered them to stand at the forefront. After this, the man loudly addressed the rest of his armed subordinates and said that they had to attack the building right now. Everyone immediately began to carry out the order. They were sure that catching one girl would be very easy. Sun Tian smiled slyly as he addressed Jia. Yana said that he wanted to tear the guy to pieces in order to sacrifice him to his dead son. Meanwhile, armed men had already rushed to the front door in order to break it down and get inside the building. One of the men was sure that this door would not withstand his blow, so he rushed at it without hesitation. To his surprise, the man was thrown back with a crash, causing him to feel severe pain in his shoulder. Another soldier mocked his colleague and prepared to demonstrate how to properly kick down doors. This time, two soldiers rushed at the doors at once, in order to be sure to open them with one blow. The next moment, the situation repeated itself. The Song family's subordinates were thrown far back, causing them to fall helplessly to the ground. The men felt severe pain and did not understand why they were unable to break down the doors, because before that, they could break even an iron door weighing 500 kilograms. Sun Tian was very dissatisfied with the result and demanded that his subordinates hurry up. One of the commanders immediately ordered the soldiers to break the windows since they could not open the door. The men immediately began to carry out the order, but to everyone's surprise, even the windows remained intact and undamaged despite the strong blows. The soldiers did not understand what was happening and why they could not break these windows. One of the men began to suggest that the glass in the windows was tempered. The second man insisted that it was just a house in a zoo and not a presidential palace, so there could not have been tempered glass there. In order not to anger their master even more, the soldiers decided to use explosive material that could blow up even a bank underground safe. The men quickly began to cover the door with explosives, not at all worried that the building could simply collapse from such a quantity. A few seconds later, the soldier began the countdown and then pressed the red button. At that very moment, a loud explosion sounded, which was supposed to open the passage into the building. Surprisingly, the door remained undamaged and the soldier finally became aware of the mysterious barrier that protected the zoo's administrative building from all sides. The soldiers were very surprised and did not understand how it was possible that the building was not damaged at all by such a powerful explosion. They also did not understand what this mysterious barrier was and how it could be overcome. Suddenly, one of the gifted people approached the commander of the soldiers and, asking him to step aside, explained that this was a superpower. Now people understood why the soldiers couldn't open the door for so long and decided that only they could handle this job. Superpowered villains quickly organized themselves and simultaneously attacked the barrier that protected the building. The result was another loud explosion, which this time easily destroyed the barrier.